Pantheism. Pantheism is the belief that the universe and God are one and the same. Unlike traditional religious views that separate the divine from the natural world, pantheism blurs the lines, suggesting that God is not a distant entity, but is present in everything, every tree, every star, every human being. This concept sees the universe itself as sacred, alive with divine energy, and interconnected in a way that transcends individual existence. The idea of pantheism is deeply powerful because it offers a sense of unity and purpose to everything in existence. Imagine looking at the world and seeing everything, every blade of grass, every gust of wind, every ripple in the water, as a manifestation of something greater than yourself. It's an idea that shifts your perception from seeing life as a collection of isolated events to seeing everything as part of a divine whole. For many, pantheism provides a deep spiritual connection to the universe, where the divine is not something to worship from afar, but something to experience and feel within. It challenges us to see divinity not as something separate or removed, but as a presence that flows through every living thing, reminding us that we are all connected. Pantheism has the power to awaken a sense of wonder, to make you feel the sacredness of life itself. It can be a source of peace, reminding you that you are part of something vast and beautiful. By embracing pantheism, you may find a profound connection to the world around you, experiencing an intimacy with the universe that feels both eternal and immediate, a bond that transcends time, space, and individual self. Philosophy of action. The philosophy of action delves into one of the most fundamental questions of human existence. What does it mean to act? It explores how actions are connected to our intentions, desires, and the very essence of who we are. Every day we make countless decisions, big and small, that propel us forward in life. But what really drives these actions? Are they the result of conscious will, or are we mere puppets of our unconscious desires and external forces? At the core of this philosophy lies the debate between free will and determinism. Are we truly in control of our actions, or are we just responding to the world around us, shaped by forces beyond our comprehension? This question strikes at the heart of our sense of self and agency. When you make a decision, when you choose one path over another, do you feel empowered, or do you sense an unseen force steering your actions? What makes the philosophy of action so emotionally charged is that it's not just about abstract concepts. It touches on who we are as individuals. Our actions define us. They are the reflection of our deepest beliefs, our ethics, our struggles. Every choice we make is an expression of our identity. So, if you were to question whether you truly have control over your decisions, it can stir up a sense of unease, even fear. What does it mean for your identity if you are not the author of your own story? The philosophy of action challenges us to confront these questions head-on, prompting us to reflect deeply on what it means to truly act and what this reveals about our inner selves. Cultural evolution. Cultural evolution is the idea that human culture, our beliefs, practices, technologies, and social structures evolves over time in a way that parallels biological evolution. Just as species adapt to their environment through natural selection, cultural practices adapt and change based on social, environmental, and technological pressures. This concept invites us to view culture not as static, but as a dynamic, ever-shifting force that shapes and is shaped by the lives of individuals and societies. Imagine a world where every idea, every tradition, and every belief is passed down through generations, not through genetics, but through social learning and communication. Each generation contributes to the evolving cultural fabric, altering it, adding to it, or challenging it. Whether it's the advent of agriculture, the birth of democracy, or the digital revolution, cultural evolution illustrates how new ideas and inventions radically transform societies. What's deeply emotional about cultural evolution is the way it ties our identity to our history and future. We inherit the values of those who came before us, yet we also have the power to shape the future by challenging outdated norms and creating new possibilities. Cultural evolution gives us a sense of continuity and change, reminding us that we are both the product and the producers of culture. It's both humbling and empowering as we realize that every small action we take, whether in thought, speech, or practice, contributes to the cultural legacy we leave behind. In a world increasingly defined by rapid cultural shifts, the concept of cultural evolution asks us to reflect on what we inherit, what we change, and the impact we can have on the world that will follow. Nihilistic hedonism. Nihilistic hedonism is a provocative and unsettling philosophy that combines two seemingly opposing ideas, nihilism and hedonism. Nihilism, the belief that life is inherently meaningless and that there is no objective purpose to existence, meets hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain as the ultimate goal. The result is a worldview that suggests if life is devoid of inherent meaning, then the pursuit of pleasure becomes the only worthwhile endeavor, since nothing else holds true significance. At its core, nihilistic hedonism raises a gut-wrenching question. If life is empty of ultimate meaning, why not indulge in every pleasure, seek every thrill, and satisfy every desire? It's a philosophy that invites both liberation and despair. On one hand, it offers freedom from the constraints of moral and societal expectations, allowing individuals to embrace their hedonistic urges without guilt. On the other, it presents a dark reality. The very freedom it offers is a freedom from meaning itself, a stark reminder that in the end, nothing truly matters. What makes nihilistic hedonism so emotionally compelling and at times terrifying is the way it confronts our deepest fears, the fear of purposelessness, the dread of an empty universe, and the anxiety of living without a higher meaning. It can be both exhilarating and crushing to accept that pleasure is all that remains when everything else fades into nothingness. This philosophy forces us to grapple with the void and asks whether the pursuit of pleasure can truly fill the emptiness left by the loss of meaning. Can pleasure ever be enough when it is all there is? Dual aspect theory. Dual aspect theory is a philosophical concept that seeks to reconcile the mind-body problem by proposing that the mental and the physical are two distinct aspects of the same underlying reality, rather than treating the mind and body as separate entities or completely reducible to one another. Dual aspect theory suggests that both are manifestations of a single, deeper substance or process. It's a perspective that offers a bridge between materialism and idealism, suggesting that mental and physical phenomena are two sides of the same coin. Imagine the human experience as a grand, intricate dance between the physical world and the mental realm, each influencing and reflecting the other. Your thoughts, emotions, and consciousness are not detached from your body, but are intimately connected to it. This theory challenges the reductionist idea that the mind can be fully explained by the brain's physical processes alone, or that mental states can be reduced to mere material phenomena. What makes dual aspect theory so emotionally compelling is its potential to address the profound mystery of consciousness. It speaks to our intuitive understanding that there is something more to human experience than just biological processes. We feel our thoughts, emotions, and consciousness as deeply personal, yet they are tied to the physical body we inhabit. This theory offers a way to honor both the intangible and the tangible, the spiritual and the material, without diminishing the significance of either. It offers hope for those seeking a more holistic understanding of human experience, where mind and body coexist as equally valid expressions of a deeper, unified reality. It challenges us to rethink the nature of existence itself and the profound connection between what we experience and the physical world we live in. Pragmatic Ethics. Pragmatic ethics is a philosophy that takes a no-nonsense, real-world approach to moral questions, asking not what is theoretically right or wrong, but what works best in a given situation. Rooted in the pragmatic tradition of thinkers like William James and John Dewey, it asserts that moral decisions should be guided by practical outcomes, the needs of people, and the circumstances at hand, rather than by rigid, absolute rules. What makes pragmatic ethics so emotionally charged is its focus on lived experience. It acknowledges the complexity of human life, recognizing that idealistic moral principles often clash with the messy, unpredictable nature of the world. When you face a difficult decision, pragmatic ethics asks you to look at the real-world consequences of your actions, weighing the benefits and harms in practical terms. The goal isn't to follow a set moral doctrine, but to find solutions that genuinely improve human well-being and solve pressing problems. This approach can be both empowering and unsettling. It empowers you to make ethical choices based on what is most likely to work in the real world, rather than being shackled by abstract ideals that may be out of touch with reality. But it can also provoke discomfort, because pragmatic ethics doesn't offer simple answers. It challenges you to accept that sometimes there are no perfect solutions, only the best possible options given the situation, and that can be a difficult truth to face. Pragmatic ethics forces you to reckon with the messy complexities of moral life, demanding that you prioritize what helps people and communities thrive in a practical, tangible way. It's a philosophy that dares you to live with the consequences of your choices, all while trying to do the most good in a world that is anything but perfect. Distributive Justice. Distributive justice is the philosophical concept that concerns how the benefits and burdens of society should be distributed among individuals. At its core, it grapples with questions of fairness and equality. Who deserves what and why? Should wealth, resources, opportunities, and even rights be allocated based on merit, need, equality, or some other principle? This concept pushes us to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality, privilege, and the structures that govern our lives. Imagine a society where resources are distributed according to the needs of the people, where the poorest and most vulnerable are prioritized, and where opportunity is truly equal for all. It's an idealistic vision that appeals to our sense of empathy and moral responsibility. But then, consider the harsh reality. Societies are often deeply unequal, with wealth and power concentrated in the hands of a few. Distributive justice forces us to question why some are born into wealth and others into poverty, why some have access to the best education while others struggle to survive. What makes distributive justice so emotionally charged is that it directly impacts how we view the world around us and our role within it. It challenges us to look beyond personal success and consider the broader societal structures that shape our lives. The idea of fairness resonates with our sense of right and wrong, making it impossible to ignore the injustices that persist in the world. Distributive justice asks us to imagine a world where every person's well-being is valued and to question the systems that perpetuate inequality, compelling us to take a stand and demand change. Kantian Constructivism. Kantian Constructivism is a profound philosophical idea that blends the ideas of Immanuel Kant with a more modern, constructivist understanding of knowledge and morality. At its core, this philosophy argues that our knowledge of the world is not simply discovered, but actively constructed by the mind. For Kant, human beings don't passively receive information from the world. Instead, we shape it using the structures of our minds, our categories of perception and understanding. In other words, the way we experience reality is filtered through our own mental frameworks. What makes Kantian Constructivism so emotionally stirring is its challenge to how we see ourselves in the world. If we create the very conditions for knowledge, how can we ever truly know if what we perceive is objective or merely a reflection of our minds? This raises a deep sense of uncertainty. How much of reality is shaped by us, and how much exists independent of our perceptions? This questioning strikes at the heart of our human experience, forcing us to confront the limitations of our understanding. The concept of morality in Kantian Constructivism is equally powerful. Kant believed that moral laws, too, are constructed by rational beings. Our moral duties are not handed down from some divine source, nor are they purely subjective preferences, but are determined by principles that rational beings can agree upon universally. This creates a sense of responsibility, a moral obligation that we shape collectively and universally through reason. At its core, Kantian Constructivism empowers us to realize that we are not passive observers of the world. We are active participants in shaping both our understanding of reality and our moral landscapes, responsible for how we experience the world and how we choose to treat one another. Causality. Causality is the idea that events are connected through cause and effect relationships, where one event, the cause, directly brings about another event, the effect. This fundamental concept shapes how we understand the world, giving us a sense of control and predictability. Every action, every decision, every change in our lives is tied to a cause. But beneath its apparent simplicity, causality poses one of the most profound and unsettling questions in philosophy. What is the true nature of the connections between causes and effects? Imagine looking at a world where every event that happens is the result of something that came before it, like a chain reaction. Your actions today will ripple through time, influencing future events in ways you can't always see. Causality provides comfort because it gives us the illusion of control. If we understand the causes of events, we feel empowered to predict and influence the future. But this certainty is often an illusion. What happens when the cause isn't clear, or when the effects seem disconnected from anything we can grasp? Causality's emotional power lies in how it challenges us to confront the fragility of our understanding. In a world governed by causal relationships, the recognition that we don't always know the cause of something, especially in complex systems, can be deeply unsettling. It forces us to question how much control we truly have over our lives. Is everything truly connected, or do we simply impose patterns where none exist? The realization that causality isn't always linear, or that some events seem to break the rules, leaves us grappling with the mystery of existence. Feminist Epistemology. Feminist epistemology is an approach to knowledge that challenges traditional ways of knowing, arguing that gender influences how we acquire, interpret, and validate knowledge. It disrupts the idea that knowledge is neutral or objective, insisting instead that it is shaped by the lived experiences, biases, and social structures of those who produce it. This philosophy highlights how dominant perspectives, especially those from white, male-dominated fields, have historically sidelined or invalidated the voices and experiences of women and marginalized groups. The emotional power of feminist epistemology lies in its call for recognition and validation of all knowledge systems. It asks us to reconsider whose knowledge has been valued and whose has been dismissed. It shines a light on the way that knowledge is often presented as universal, when in reality it reflects the interests of the dominant social groups. Feminist epistemologists argue that our understanding of the world would be richer, more complex, and more accurate if we acknowledged and incorporated diverse perspectives, particularly those of women, people of color, and the oppressed. What makes feminist epistemology so compelling is its emotional resonance with anyone who has ever felt their experiences were ignored or marginalized. It challenges us to confront our assumptions about who holds power in the creation of knowledge and calls for a more inclusive, empathetic approach to truth. It suggests that knowledge is not just an intellectual pursuit, it's a deeply political and personal one, intertwined with our identities and struggles. In a world where power dynamics shape much of what we know, feminist epistemology invites us to dismantle these hierarchies and build a more equitable framework for understanding reality. Materialist Reductionism. Materialist reductionism is the belief that everything that exists, including human thoughts, emotions, and consciousness, can be fully explained by physical processes and the laws of nature. According to this view, all complex phenomena, whether biological, psychological, or social, are reducible to simpler, more fundamental physical elements. In essence, if you could trace every thought and feeling back far enough, you would find that they are simply the result of atoms and molecules interacting in specific ways, governed by the laws of physics and chemistry. This idea can be both liberating and unsettling. On one hand, it offers a comforting sense of clarity. If everything can be reduced to physical components, then perhaps there's a solution for everything, a scientific explanation for every mystery, a way to unlock the secrets of the mind, life, and the universe. It paints a picture of an ordered, rational world where everything follows the rules of nature and where even the most complex human experiences can eventually be understood by understanding the underlying biology and chemistry. But there's also something deeply unsettling about materialist reductionism. If everything, including our consciousness and subjective experiences, can be reduced to nothing more than chemical reactions, does that mean our emotions, our sense of self, our very essence, are just byproducts of brain processes? Are we, in the end, nothing more than elaborate machines controlled by forces beyond our understanding? This challenge to our sense of free will and individuality strikes at the heart of human existence, raising questions about identity, purpose, and meaning. Materialist reductionism forces us to confront the nature of reality itself, pushing us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the self, the universe, and our place within it. It's a philosophy that can leave us feeling awestruck by the vastness of science, yet profoundly vulnerable in its implications. Gnosticism. Gnosticism is an ancient philosophical and religious belief that asserts the importance of hidden, esoteric knowledge, gnosis, as the path to spiritual enlightenment. At its heart, Gnosticism suggests that the material world is flawed or even corrupt, created by a lesser, imperfect deity. The true divine realm, in contrast, exists beyond the physical, and it is through acquiring secret knowledge that individuals can transcend the limitations of the physical world and reconnect with the divine. What makes Gnosticism so emotionally gripping is the tension it creates between the material and the spiritual. It suggests that everything we see, touch, and experience, our bodies, our relationships, our worldly desires, is part of a false reality, a distraction from our true nature. Imagine the jarring realization that the life you're living, the things you cherish, might not be what they seem. This perspective evokes a sense of alienation and disillusionment as it questions the very fabric of existence. Yet, within this worldview lies a deep yearning for liberation. Gnosticism offers the possibility of awakening, of transcending the mundane and the physical to access a higher, purer state of being. It calls to those who feel trapped in the everyday grind, promising a secret knowledge that can set them free from the confines of material life. This knowledge isn't academic or theoretical. It's experiential, deeply personal, and transformative. For those who feel the weight of the world's imperfections, Gnosticism provides a powerful vision of escape, a way to rise above the flawed physical world and embrace the divine truth hidden within. But it also leaves an unsettling question. If the material world is so inherently flawed, what does that say about our existence here and now? Philosophy of history. The philosophy of history is the study of the underlying principles, structures, and meanings that shape historical events and human progress. It seeks to answer questions like, is history shaped by grand, inevitable forces or by the actions of individuals? Does history have a purpose, a direction, or an end goal? And if so, what is the meaning behind the patterns we observe in the past? This branch of philosophy invites us to look beyond mere dates and events and ponder the deeper implications of the human story. Imagine looking at the vast tapestry of human existence and asking whether the twists and turns of history are random or part of a larger, meaningful pattern. From the rise and fall of civilizations to the enduring struggles for freedom, the philosophy of history challenges us to interpret these events not just as isolated moments, but as interconnected parts of a larger narrative. Are we progressing toward a better future, or are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes? What makes the philosophy of history so emotionally powerful is its ability to make us reflect on our place in the world. History isn't just something that happened. It's a mirror reflecting who we are and who we strive to become. As we examine past injustices, triumphs, and tragedies, we begin to ask what lessons we should carry forward and what we must let go of. This philosophy stirs our deepest emotions, compelling us to face our collective past and take responsibility for shaping the future. It's an ongoing dialogue with the past, inviting us to consider what we can learn from it to guide us toward a more meaningful existence. Altruism. Altruism is the selfless concern for the well-being of others, often at the expense of one's own needs or desires. It's the act of giving without expecting anything in return, a profound expression of empathy and compassion that transcends personal gain. Whether it's a parent sacrificing for their child, a stranger offering help in times of crisis, or even the simple act of kindness between friends, altruism is a cornerstone of human connection and society. What makes altruism so emotionally stirring is its raw display of human generosity and love. It taps into our deepest desires to be part of something greater than ourselves. In a world that can often feel selfish and cold, acts of altruism remind us of the beauty of selflessness and the power of human compassion. It's a reminder that, despite our individual struggles and desires, we are capable of extraordinary acts of care for others, pushing the boundaries of our own comfort to uplift those around us. Yet, altruism can also evoke a sense of vulnerability. To give without expectation means to expose oneself to potential hurt or sacrifice. There's an inherent risk in being selfless because it requires us to let go of our own needs and sometimes even our own identity. But in doing so, altruism fosters deep connections and mutual understanding, revealing how much we are capable of when we act from a place of genuine concern. In the midst of a world that often glorifies self-interest, altruism shines as a powerful force, showing us that our greatest fulfillment may come not from what we take, but from what we give. It is both humbling and uplifting, reminding us that true strength lies in lifting others up. Geocentrism. Geocentrism is the ancient belief that Earth is the center of the universe and that all celestial bodies, including the sun, moon, and stars, revolve around it. For centuries, this view was the cornerstone of human understanding of the cosmos, endorsed by philosophers like Aristotle and Ptolemy. It shaped how people saw their place in the universe, giving Earth, and by extension, humanity, a sense of supreme importance. Under geocentrism, the Earth was not only the focal point of the universe, but also a symbol of human significance, making us feel central, special, and protected by the very structure of the heavens. But imagine the profound shift that occurred when this view was overturned. In the 16th century, Copernicus proposed the heliocentric model, placing the sun at the center, and this shattered the long-held geocentric perspective, the idea that Earth was no longer the center of everything, simply another planet orbiting the sun, was not just a scientific revolution, but a psychological one. It forced humanity to confront the humbling reality that we are not the center of the universe, that we are just one tiny speck in the vast, uncharted expanse of space. Geocentrism stirs deep emotions because it encapsulates a time when humanity felt uniquely significant in the cosmos. To realize that Earth, and by extension, humankind, was not the center of everything was a blow to our self-image. Yet, this dramatic shift in understanding also opened the door to a more awe-inspiring view of the universe, one where the unknown becomes vast and infinite, and where the pursuit of knowledge becomes an endless journey to understand our true place in the cosmos. Buddhism, philosophical. Philosophical Buddhism is a profound exploration of the nature of existence, suffering, and the path to enlightenment. Rooted in the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, it presents a worldview that challenges the very foundation of how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. At its core, Buddhism asks one simple yet profound question: why do we suffer, and how can we break free from it? The answer lies in understanding the nature of reality and our attachments to it. Buddhism teaches that suffering, dukkha, is an inherent part of human existence, stemming from our desires, attachments, and the illusion of permanence. It calls this out with startling clarity. Nothing in life is permanent. The people we love, the possessions we cherish, and even our own bodies, everything is in a constant state of flux. This realization, while uncomfortable, is the key to liberation. The Buddhist path is not about seeking more pleasure or avoiding pain. It is about seeing the world as it truly is, without the veil of delusion. The Eightfold Path is the guide for transcending suffering, emphasizing right understanding, right action, right intention, and more. It's a journey toward mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion, encouraging individuals to live in harmony with the impermanence of life. But what makes this philosophy so emotionally profound is the radical sense of freedom it offers. By letting go of attachment, we free ourselves from the constant cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. Buddhism offers a unique perspective on life and suffering that is both calming and challenging. It reminds us that peace is not found in external circumstances, but in the way we relate to the world, through mindfulness, awareness, and letting go of our illusions. It's an invitation to transform suffering into wisdom, to transcend the self, and embrace the interconnectedness of all things. Empathy, philosophy of mind. Empathy in the philosophy of mind is the ability to deeply understand and share the feelings of another. It goes beyond mere sympathy, which is feeling pity for someone else's suffering. It's about emotionally stepping into their world and experiencing the world through their eyes. In philosophical terms, empathy addresses the question of how we can truly grasp the inner experiences of others when we can only access our own thoughts and feelings. It challenges the boundaries of self and other, pushing us to reconsider how we connect to the minds of those around us. The power of empathy is not just in its ability to forge connections between individuals, but in how it makes us confront the limits of our own consciousness. How do we truly know what it's like to be someone else? We cannot directly experience their thoughts, memories, or emotions, yet empathy allows us to bridge this gap, making us feel, if only for a moment, that we are not isolated in our individual minds. This is what makes empathy so emotionally stirring. It brings people closer, breaking down the walls of solitude and creating shared experiences that transcend individual boundaries. Philosophically, empathy is not only a tool for understanding others, but a profound challenge to the concept of the self. It forces us to question how deeply we can ever understand another person and whether we can ever truly escape the confines of our own subjectivity. This question is both humbling and enriching. Empathy teaches us that our connection to others is not just intellectual, but emotional, and perhaps even the most powerful way we engage with the world. Frugality Principle. The Frugality Principle is the idea that resources, whether time, money, or energy, should be used wisely, with minimal waste and maximal efficiency. At its core, it's about making deliberate, mindful choices that prioritize necessity over excess, aiming for simplicity and sustainability in all aspects of life. Frugality isn't just about saving money. It's a lifestyle that promotes the idea that less is often more, urging us to find value in the essentials rather than the fleeting desires that often lead to overconsumption. What makes the Frugality Principle emotionally compelling is how it calls us to reconsider our relationship with material possessions and consumption. In a world that constantly pushes us to buy more, own more, and do more, frugality feels like a refreshing act of rebellion, a stand against the overwhelming tide of consumerism. It is a quiet act of resistance, one that cultivates gratitude for what we already have and promotes a sense of peace by rejecting the idea that happiness can only be found in accumulation. At the heart of this principle is the recognition that true fulfillment comes not from possessing more, but from appreciating and making the most of what we already have. It challenges us to reflect on how much of our lives are consumed by the pursuit of material wealth, often at the cost of deeper, more meaningful experiences. Frugality shifts the focus from external acquisitions to internal contentment, asking us to find joy in simplicity and sustainability. The Frugality Principle evokes a deep sense of self-control and mindfulness, inviting us to live intentionally, focusing on what truly matters and finding richness in life's essentials rather than its excess. Intellectual virtue. Intellectual virtue refers to the character traits and qualities that enable individuals to pursue truth, knowledge, and understanding in a rigorous and honest manner. It's not just about being smart. It's about how one approaches the process of learning and thinking. These virtues include qualities like open-mindedness, intellectual courage, curiosity, and intellectual humility. They guide us in our quest for wisdom and shape the way we engage with complex ideas and navigate the world of knowledge. What makes intellectual virtue so compelling is the way it connects to our very sense of integrity. It's not just about having the right answers, but having the right attitude toward the search for answers. Intellectual courage, for instance, is the willingness to confront difficult or uncomfortable ideas even when they challenge your beliefs. Intellectual humility allows you to acknowledge the limits of your own knowledge and be open to learning from others, while intellectual curiosity keeps you hungry for discovery, refusing to settle for superficial understanding. The emotional depth of intellectual virtue is in its power to transform us, not just as thinkers, but as individuals. It asks us to confront our biases, to challenge our assumptions, and to approach the world with a sense of wonder and a willingness to grow. In a world often dominated by sound bites and instant gratification, intellectual virtue is a call to slow down, reflect deeply, and cultivate a life of thoughtful engagement with the world. The pursuit of intellectual virtue may feel challenging at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding. It invites us to live more intentionally, to engage more meaningfully, and ultimately to become better, more thoughtful human beings in our search for truth. Critical rationalism. Critical rationalism, developed by philosopher Karl Popper, is a revolutionary approach to knowledge and science that challenges traditional views of how we come to understand the world. Unlike empiricism, which holds that knowledge comes from sensory experience, or rationalism, which emphasizes the role of reason, critical rationalism asserts that all knowledge is fallible and must be subject to constant scrutiny and testing. It argues that we cannot prove our theories to be true, but we can only attempt to falsify them. If a theory withstands rigorous testing without being disproven, it remains viable but never certain. What makes critical rationalism so emotionally compelling is its invitation to embrace uncertainty. In a world where we often crave certainty and security, Popper's philosophy insists that we must live with doubt and skepticism, constantly questioning our beliefs and ideas. This can feel unsettling, even disorienting. After all, if nothing is truly proven, how can we be sure of anything? Yet, within this uncertainty lies a powerful freedom. Critical rationalism offers us the intellectual courage to let go of dogma and embrace the ever-evolving nature of knowledge. This philosophy is not just an academic exercise. It deeply influences how we approach problems, make decisions, and interact with the world. It teaches us that truth is not a final destination, but an ongoing journey. Each theory, each belief must be tested, challenged, and refined. This mindset shifts the focus from finding absolute answers to cultivating an attitude of open-mindedness and continuous improvement. Critical rationalism challenges us to accept that we can never have absolute certainty, but that should not stop us from striving to understand the world better. It calls us to engage with life not as passive recipients of knowledge, but as active participants in a never-ending process of learning and growth. Ecocentrism. Ecocentrism is a philosophical perspective that places the environment and all living things within it at the center of ethical consideration. Unlike anthropocentrism, which prioritizes human needs and values, ecocentrism argues that nature and non-human life have intrinsic value, meaning they deserve moral consideration independent of their utility to humans. It challenges the idea that humans are the most important beings on Earth, and instead suggests that all elements of the ecosystem, from the tiniest organisms to the grandest landscapes, are interconnected and valuable in their own right. Imagine a world where the health of the planet isn't just an afterthought or a resource to be exploited, but is the primary focus of our ethical decisions. In this worldview, a tree, a river, or an endangered species isn't valuable simply because it benefits humans, but because it contributes to the well-being of the Earth as a whole. Ecocentrism forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our impact on the planet, challenging us to rethink our priorities and actions in a way that respects the delicate balance of nature. What makes ecocentrism so emotionally compelling is its ability to awaken a deep sense of responsibility and urgency. It connects us to the planet on a visceral level, reminding us that our actions have consequences far beyond ourselves. We begin to see nature not as something separate from us, but as something that sustains us, and that we too are part of a vast, interconnected web of life. In a world increasingly defined by environmental crises, ecocentrism stirs a powerful call to action, asking us to reconsider our relationship with the Earth and shift our focus to the preservation and flourishing of all life. Moral universalism. Moral universalism is the belief that there are universal moral principles that apply to all people, regardless of culture, time, or place. It suggests that certain ethical truths are objective and should be upheld universally, transcending individual beliefs or societal norms. Whether it's the belief in the inherent dignity of every human being or the principle that acts of kindness are always good, moral universalism insists that certain values are fundamental to the human experience and they apply to everyone, everywhere. What makes moral universalism so emotionally stirring is its promise of shared humanity. It offers a sense of connection, reminding us that despite our differences, we are all bound by common moral truths. It calls us to see beyond the surface of cultural and individual diversity and recognize a moral foundation that unites us all. In a world often divided by cultural, religious, and political lines, moral universalism offers a compelling vision of collective ethical responsibility, one that holds that everyone, regardless of background, deserves to be treated with fairness, respect, and compassion. But it also challenges us in profound ways. Moral universalism asks us to confront difficult questions. How do we determine which principles are universal? Who decides what is universally moral? And perhaps most poignantly, how do we apply these principles in a world filled with moral disagreements and conflicting values? It can stir discomfort as it pushes us to reflect on whether we are truly living up to these universal ideals. Yet, beneath the complexity and challenge, moral universalism carries with it an urgent, deeply emotional call for justice, equality, and the recognition of our shared humanity, a moral foundation that binds us all, regardless of where we come from. Logical positivism. Logical positivism is a philosophy that argues that meaningful statements must be either empirically verifiable or logically necessary. In other words, if a statement cannot be tested through observation or cannot be proven true or false through logical reasoning, then it's essentially meaningless. Developed in the early 20th century by the Vienna Circle, this philosophy aimed to bring clarity and precision to philosophical inquiry by emphasizing the importance of language and scientific method in the search for truth. At its core, logical positivism rejects metaphysics, the idea that philosophical speculation about things like God, the soul, or the ultimate nature of reality is inherently meaningless because these concepts cannot be empirically tested or logically validated. This strict emphasis on verifiability forces a radical shift in how we view knowledge. Suddenly, all philosophical debates about the nature of existence, morality, or the universe itself are reduced to questions that can either be empirically proven or logically deduced. What makes logical positivism so striking and emotionally stirring is its unflinching confidence in science and its demand for rigor. In a world that can feel chaotic and uncertain, logical positivism offers a promise that clarity and certainty can be found through careful observation and logical analysis, but it also strips away many of the comforting abstractions that people often rely on, leaving a sense of intellectual austerity. Without metaphysical comforts, we're left to confront the world with only the cold tools of reason and empirical observation. For many, this can feel liberating, a return to intellectual honesty and a focus on what we can truly know. For others, it's disorienting, as it challenges cherished beliefs and makes the universe seem far less mysterious and far more mechanical. Logical positivism forces us to confront the limits of human knowledge and the stark reality that, in the end, only what we can observe and prove is truly meaningful. Ideology. Ideology is more than just a collection of beliefs. It is the lens through which individuals and societies interpret and engage with the world. It's the framework that shapes our perceptions, guiding how we understand our place in society, how we view power, and how we justify our actions. Whether political, religious, economic, or social, ideologies function as systems of ideas that provide structure and meaning, helping individuals navigate a complex and often chaotic world. What makes ideology so emotionally powerful is the way it permeates every aspect of our lives. It influences what we value, who we trust, and what we fear. Ideologies shape our relationships, our laws, and our societal norms. When we are deeply aligned with a particular ideology, it can create a sense of belonging, purpose, and identity. Our beliefs become an anchor in the storm of modern existence. Yet, it also has a dark side. Ideologies can create division, justify oppression, and stifle critical thinking. When adhered to rigidly, they can become blinders, preventing us from seeing beyond the framework they provide. The emotional charge of ideology is deeply tied to the way it resonates with our personal experiences and the narratives we tell ourselves. It provides answers to life's most difficult questions. What is the meaning of life? What is justice? How should we live together? However, ideology can also polarize, making it difficult to engage with people who hold different views. It can push us to see the world in black and white terms, where our side is always right and the other is always wrong. In a rapidly changing world, understanding the power of ideology is crucial. It shapes our decisions, fuels conflicts, and guides movements for change. But the key is awareness. By understanding the role ideology plays in our lives, we can prevent ourselves from being controlled by it and instead use it to promote growth, understanding, and empathy. Cosmological Argument. The cosmological argument is one of the oldest and most profound arguments for the existence of God. It suggests that the existence of the universe itself demands an explanation, and that the best explanation is the presence of a necessary, uncaused being, often identified as God. The argument begins with the simple observation that everything in the universe appears to have a cause. Yet, if everything has a cause, what caused the universe itself? This leads to the conclusion that there must be an ultimate cause, a first cause, that set everything into motion, and this cause is often thought to be divine. What makes the cosmological argument emotionally charged is the way it forces us to confront the mystery of existence itself. Why is there something rather than nothing? How did the universe come into being? These questions are not just philosophical puzzles. They tap into a deep human longing for meaning, order, and purpose in a vast and seemingly indifferent cosmos. The cosmological argument suggests that behind the vastness of the universe, there must be a source, a power that transcends time, space, and even our understanding. The emotional pull of the cosmological argument lies in the hope it offers. For many, the idea that the universe is not an accident, but the result of a purposeful cause, brings a sense of comfort and security. It speaks to the human desire for order and meaning in an often chaotic and uncertain world. It challenges us to look beyond the physical world and to seek answers that reach into the very essence of existence itself, raising the possibility that the universe is part of something far greater than we could ever imagine. Feminist Ethics. Feminist ethics is an approach to moral philosophy that centers the lived experiences of women and marginalized groups, challenging traditional ethical frameworks that have historically been shaped by male perspectives. It critiques the ways in which traditional ethics has often ignored or marginalized women's voices, experiences, and concerns, arguing that ethical theory must be inclusive, relational, and intersectional. Feminist ethics is not just about advocating for women's rights. It's about questioning the very foundations of ethical theory, aiming to create a more just, empathetic, and equal moral framework. What makes feminist ethics so emotionally compelling is its deep connection to real-world struggles for equality and justice. It urges us to see morality not as a detached, abstract set of rules, but as something that is deeply rooted in human relationships, power dynamics, and social contexts. This approach asks us to consider how power, gender, race, and class shape our moral understandings and actions, highlighting the need for an ethical framework that accounts for social inequalities and fosters care, empathy, and solidarity. The emotional power of feminist ethics lies in its challenge to traditional structures of power and dominance. It asks us to confront uncomfortable truths about the way society has been structured, truths about who gets to define morality, whose voices are heard, and who is left out of moral considerations. It stirs a sense of urgency and hope, pushing us to rethink ethical decisions in ways that can lead to a more inclusive and compassionate world. Feminist ethics invites us to move beyond the rigid, impersonal ideals of traditional philosophy and embrace a moral vision that values interconnectedness, care, and justice for all. Jainism, philosophical. Jainism is an ancient Indian philosophy that teaches the path to spiritual liberation through nonviolence, truth, and asceticism. At its core, Jainism emphasizes the interconnectedness of all life and advocates for the utmost respect for every living being, no matter how small. Unlike many other spiritual systems, Jainism does not believe in a creator God. Instead, it teaches that the universe is eternal and operates according to natural laws. The focus of Jain philosophy is on self-discipline, purification, and the pursuit of liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. What makes Jainism deeply emotional and compelling is its radical commitment to nonviolence, ahimsa. In its purest form, nonviolence means not causing harm to any living creature, whether through thought, word, or deed. Jains take this principle so seriously that many choose to live vegetarian lives and avoid actions that could inadvertently harm even the smallest organisms, like sweeping the ground before walking to prevent stepping on insects. The emotional weight of this philosophy lies in its profound respect for all forms of life and its challenge to us to reconsider how we treat other beings. Jainism also teaches the concept of anekantavada, or the belief in multiple perspectives. This philosophical tenet suggests that truth and reality are complex and can be understood from different angles, encouraging intellectual humility and open-mindedness. This openness can be deeply transformative, urging us to embrace diversity of thought and perspective in both our personal lives and our interactions with others. Jainism's emphasis on self-purification through meditation and ascetic practices invites us to reflect on the nature of our desires and attachments, and to strive for inner peace and spiritual freedom. The philosophy is not just a set of teachings, but a call to live with a deep sense of ethical responsibility, compassion, and awareness, which resonates emotionally, making us question our values and actions in the world. Human nature! Human nature is the essence of what it means to be human, our fundamental characteristics, instincts, and tendencies that shape how we think, act, and interact with the world around us. Philosophers have long debated the question, what drives human behavior? Is it our biological instincts, our environment, our culture, or some deeper, intrinsic quality? Some argue that humans are inherently selfish, driven by a deep need for survival and self-preservation, while others believe we are naturally social creatures, seeking connection, empathy, and cooperation. What makes the concept of human nature so emotionally charged is the way it forces us to confront who we really are beneath the layers of culture and socialization. If human nature is inherently selfish, does that mean we are doomed to constant conflict and inequality? Or, if we are naturally inclined toward cooperation, why do we still see so much cruelty, injustice, and division in the world? These questions stir up a deep sense of vulnerability as they challenge our most basic assumptions about ourselves and our society. Human nature also raises the unsettling question of free will versus determinism. If our actions are determined by our biological instincts or the environment we are born into, do we really have control over our choices, or are we merely products of these influences? This struggle between nature and nurture, instinct and choice, is one of the most enduring dilemmas of human existence. In grappling with human nature, we come face to face with our flaws and virtues, our potential and limitations. It is a concept that forces us to examine our deepest motivations, our relationships with others, and our capacity for growth. By understanding human nature, we gain insight into our own behaviors and the forces that shape the world around us. It is a journey that can be both empowering and humbling as we realize the complexity of what it means to be truly human. Deterritorialization, Deleuze and Guattari. Deterritorialization, a concept developed by philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, refers to the process by which established systems, norms, or structures are destabilized or removed. It's the breaking down of boundaries, whether cultural, political, or psychological, that have previously confined and organized society. In their work, Deleuze and Guattari describe deterritorialization as a force that pushes against the traditional, the familiar, and the ordered, creating space for new possibilities, new identities, and new ways of thinking. At its core, deterritorialization is a philosophy of disruption. It's about shedding the constraints that define us, whether through oppressive societal structures, rigid identities, or limiting beliefs. Imagine it as the liberation from the status quo, where norms and boundaries dissolve, opening up a fluid space where transformation and innovation can occur. In this space, people are no longer confined by predetermined roles or histories, but can explore new, infinite potentialities for existence. The emotional weight of deterritorialization comes from its unsettling power. It challenges the familiar, the safe, and the predictable. It confronts us with the anxiety of uncertainty and chaos, but also with the exhilarating potential of reinvention. It forces us to ask, what happens when everything we thought was stable is no longer fixed? It's a concept that taps into our deepest desires for freedom and individuality, while simultaneously stirring fear about the dissolution of the very structures that give our lives meaning. Deleuze and Guattari's concept forces us to question what it means to be human, to be part of a society, and to exist in a world where boundaries are no longer stable. It's a call to embrace fluidity, creativity, and transformation, but also a reminder that such liberation comes with both opportunity and uncertainty. Cultural determinism. Cultural determinism is the theory that the values, beliefs, and behaviors of individuals are shaped primarily by their culture. It asserts that human actions and decisions are not just influenced by biology or individual will, but by the cultural context in which people are raised. From language and customs to social norms and historical legacies, cultural determinism suggests that culture plays a central, even overriding role in shaping how we think, act, and relate to the world around us. What makes cultural determinism emotionally powerful is its ability to reveal the profound impact that culture has on our sense of identity and morality. It challenges the idea of individuals as completely autonomous agents, encouraging us to see ourselves not just as separate entities, but as deeply embedded within a web of cultural influences. The clothes we wear, the foods we eat, the way we interact with others, these are all in large part the products of cultural norms and values that have been passed down through generations. This idea stirs up powerful emotions because it forces us to confront the reality that much of what we consider to be ourselves is, in fact, shaped by something much larger than our individual consciousness. Cultural determinism also evokes a sense of vulnerability and even guilt, as it challenges the idea of personal responsibility. Are we truly free to make our own choices, or are we simply following a script written by the culture we were born into? Yet, this philosophy also brings a sense of solidarity, as it reminds us that no one is truly alone in their struggles or choices. Our actions, while deeply personal, are part of a larger cultural narrative, a narrative that connects us to others in ways we may not even realize. The doctrine of double effect. The doctrine of double effect is a moral principle that seeks to resolve the ethical dilemma faced when an action that has both good and bad consequences is performed. According to this doctrine, an action that causes a harmful effect may be morally permissible if the harm is not intended, even though it is foreseen, as long as the intended effect is good and outweighs the harmful consequence. The doctrine is often invoked in ethical debates surrounding issues like war, medical decisions, and self-defense. At its heart, the doctrine of double effect wrestles with our moral intuitions about intent versus consequence. Imagine a doctor administering a high dose of painkillers to relieve a patient's suffering, knowing that it might unintentionally shorten the patient's life. The doctor's intention is to alleviate pain, not to cause death, but the harmful effect, death, is still a foreseeable result. According to the doctrine of double effect, the doctor's action may still be morally justified because the harm was not intended, and the overall goal was to benefit the patient. The emotional power of this doctrine lies in its ability to guide us through morally complex situations where doing the right thing isn't always clear-cut. It asks us to focus not only on the outcomes, but on the motivations behind our actions. It gives us a framework to navigate difficult moral terrain, allowing us to distinguish between actions that are morally acceptable and those that are morally wrong based on intent. However, the doctrine of double effect can be emotionally challenging because it forces us to confront the reality that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. It asks us to examine whether the ends can ever truly justify the means and where we draw the line between permissible harm and unacceptable harm in the pursuit of a greater good. Moral particularism. Moral particularism is a radical and thought-provoking approach to ethics that challenges the idea of universal moral principles or rules. Instead of adhering to a rigid set of moral laws that apply to all situations, moral particularism argues that the morality of an action depends on the specific context in which it occurs. It asserts that no single principle can be universally applied to every scenario. Rather, each situation must be evaluated on its own merits, with moral judgment being shaped by the nuances of that moment. What makes moral particularism so emotionally engaging is the sense of freedom and responsibility it offers. It invites us to trust our moral intuitions and the complexity of our lived experiences rather than relying on predefined rules or doctrines. This approach demands a deep, almost visceral connection to the present moment, a sharp awareness of the unique moral landscape in which we find ourselves. Every decision becomes a new challenge, a moral puzzle to be solved in real time, and this can be both liberating and anxiety-inducing. But there's a darker side to moral particularism. If there are no universal moral principles, does that mean morality is entirely subjective? Could this approach lead to moral chaos, where actions are justified based on personal whims or cultural biases? This question strikes at the core of our understanding of right and wrong, shaking the very foundation of how we determine moral actions. The emotional intensity of moral particularism comes from its demand for constant moral reflection without the safety net of overarching rules. It forces us to engage with the complexity of human life, where the right decision may not always be clear, and challenges us to take full responsibility for our choices. In doing so, it asks us to confront the tension between freedom and uncertainty in our moral lives. Clifford's Principle. Clifford's Principle, formulated by philosopher William K. Clifford, asserts that it is morally wrong to believe anything without sufficient evidence. At its core, the principle argues that faith, especially when unsupported by empirical or logical proof, can lead to harmful consequences, not only for the believer, but for society as a whole. Clifford famously stated, "It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. This powerful statement challenges the way we often form beliefs, urging us to scrutinize the foundation of our convictions before allowing them to shape our actions and decisions. The emotional resonance of Clifford's principle lies in its call for intellectual honesty and responsibility. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable idea that many of our deeply held beliefs, whether about religion, politics, or personal identity, may be based on insufficient evidence or blind faith. Imagine the impact of living in a world where everyone critically examined their beliefs before embracing them. Would we be more rational, more connected, or even more compassionate if we only believed in things that were supported by reason and evidence? Yet, Clifford's principle can stir unease. It challenges the way we've been taught to think, where trust, tradition, and intuition often play a powerful role in shaping our views. The emotional tension arises when we realize that accepting beliefs without evidence can sometimes lead to dangerous consequences, from personal harm to social conflict. Clifford's principle asks us to confront the cost of unexamined faith, urging us to build our convictions not on hope or desire, but on solid ground. Machiavellian Ethics. Machiavellian ethics is rooted in the ideas of Niccolo Machiavelli, particularly his views on power, politics, and morality, which challenge traditional notions of ethical behavior. At its core, Machiavellian ethics argues that the pursuit of power and success often justifies the use of any means necessary, including deception, manipulation, and ruthlessness. In Machiavellian thought, the end, typically the acquisition or maintenance of power, justifies the means, even if those means are morally questionable or harsh. What makes Machiavellian ethics so emotionally charged is its stark contrast to more idealistic moral frameworks that emphasize virtue, honesty, and integrity. It taps into our darker, more pragmatic impulses, those moments when we are faced with difficult choices where idealism seems impractical or naive. The idea that sometimes achieving a greater good might require morally dubious actions strikes a deep chord, especially in a world where political and social struggles often seem to reward cunning over virtue. Machiavellian ethics stirs a sense of unease and discomfort because it forces us to confront the complex realities of power dynamics and human nature. It asks us to consider the uncomfortable truth that in some situations, power and survival might require us to bend or break ethical rules. The emotional weight of this philosophy lies in the way it challenges us to rethink our moral compass. Can we justify morally questionable actions if the outcome benefits the greater good, or does this compromise our integrity? The haunting nature of Machiavellian ethics lies in the tension between what we want to believe is right and the harsh realities of the world we live in. Identity politics. Identity politics is the idea that political positions and movements should be based on the interests and perspectives of social groups defined by shared characteristics such as race, gender, sexuality, religion, or nationality. This approach emphasizes the importance of recognizing and addressing the unique experiences and struggles faced by marginalized or oppressed groups. It holds that people's identities, shaped by these collective characteristics, play a central role in how they experience society, interact with power structures, and understand the world. The emotional resonance of identity politics is powerful. It speaks to the lived realities of individuals who have been systematically excluded or oppressed based on their identity. For many, identity politics offers a sense of empowerment, a way to claim a voice in political discourse that has often been ignored or silenced. It gives individuals a way to express the pain, frustration, and hope that arise from their unique experiences of injustice and inequality. However, identity politics also sparks controversy. Critics argue that it can fragment society by emphasizing division over unity, creating an us versus them mentality. Some fear it can lead to polarization and hinder social cohesion as people begin to prioritize their group's interests over broader societal goals. It can also lead to oversimplification, where complex individuals are reduced to one aspect of their identity, stripping them of their full complexity. The emotional charge behind identity politics is undeniable. It challenges us to confront the realities of systemic inequality, to examine our own privileges and biases, and to ask difficult questions about how power is distributed in society. It forces us to reckon with the uncomfortable truths of exclusion and inequality, stirring feelings of both outrage and hope, and challenging our notions of justice and solidarity. Hobbesian state of nature. The Hobbesian state of nature is a chilling and profound concept introduced by philosopher Thomas Hobbes in his work Leviathan. It portrays the human condition before the establishment of society and government, an imagined time when there were no laws, no authority, and no social contracts to govern behavior. Hobbes described this state as one of anarchy, where individuals driven by self-interest are in a constant state of conflict with one another. In this state, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. What makes the Hobbesian state of nature so emotionally powerful is the terrifying realization of what humanity could be without the constraints of civilization. It forces us to confront our darkest instincts, our desire for power, survival, and dominance. Hobbes believed that without a central authority to enforce order, individuals would act purely in their own self-interest, leading to a war of all against all. In this view, morality isn't naturally inherent in humans, but rather a construct developed out of necessity for self-preservation. The emotional weight of this concept is profound because it touches on the fear of chaos and the fragility of society. It suggests that the only thing keeping us from descending into violence and disorder is the existence of social contracts and governing institutions. This makes us question the nature of authority and control. Are we truly capable of living peacefully without a higher power to enforce rules, or are we just one step away from anarchy? At its core, the Hobbesian state of nature forces us to examine the fine line between civilization and chaos, pushing us to appreciate the delicate balance that sustains social order. It challenges us to reflect on what we would become if that balance were to crumble, and whether human nature can truly be trusted to sustain peace. Instrumentalism. Instrumentalism is a philosophical approach that views theories, ideas, and concepts not as true or false in their own right, but as tools for predicting and manipulating the world. According to instrumentalism, the value of a theory lies not in its representation of reality, but in its utility, its ability to explain, predict, and control outcomes. In other words, if a scientific theory works effectively in explaining phenomena or solving problems, it is considered true in a practical sense, even if it may not reflect the underlying nature of reality. The emotional weight of instrumentalism comes from its bold shift away from traditional notions of truth. It forces us to think differently about knowledge and science, not as an endeavor to uncover ultimate truths about the world, but as a pragmatic project focused on results. Imagine living in a world where what matters most isn't whether something is true, but whether it works. This shift can feel both liberating and unsettling. On one hand, it opens the door to practical, results-oriented thinking, allowing us to embrace theories and technologies that improve our lives, regardless of their metaphysical accuracy. On the other hand, it questions the very foundations of how we understand reality, stirring a sense of unease about the boundaries between truth and utility. Instrumentalism challenges us to reconsider our approach to knowledge and existence itself. It asks, Are our theories and beliefs meant to mirror an objective reality, or are they simply tools we've developed to navigate and improve our world? This concept forces us to reevaluate the very nature of truth, offering a view of knowledge that is as much about function as it is about understanding. It's a powerful, provocative philosophy that reshapes how we think about the role of science, theory, and human progress in shaping the world around us. Hegelianism. Hegelianism is a philosophical framework based on the ideas of German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, whose work delves into the nature of reality, history, and human consciousness. At the heart of Hegelianism is the concept of the dialectic, the idea that progress in thought and history occurs through a process of contradiction and resolution. According to Hegel, every idea, thesis, inevitably gives rise to its opposite, antithesis, and through their conflict, a new, higher understanding emerges, synthesis. This triadic process drives the development of both individual consciousness and the unfolding of history itself. What makes Hegelianism so emotionally captivating is the deep sense of evolution and transformation it brings to our understanding of the world. It offers a vision of life where everything, every thought, every society, every person is in a constant state of becoming, ever moving towards higher stages of understanding and self-realization. It suggests that every struggle, every conflict, even those that seem destructive, is part of a larger process that drives us toward greater freedom and enlightenment. This view can stir hope and excitement as it portrays life not as static or fixed, but as a dynamic, ever-evolving journey towards a better, more complete reality. Yet, Hegelianism also evokes a sense of unease. The dialectical process suggests that conflict and contradiction are essential for growth, which means that progress is often messy, painful, and uncomfortable. It challenges us to embrace the complexity of life, where contradictions and struggles are not obstacles but necessary steps in our journey toward higher understanding. This can be unsettling, as it calls us to accept that growth is often born from tension, chaos, and conflict, rather than from smooth, linear progress. Hegelianism confronts us with the emotional reality that to reach a higher state of being, we must first endure the struggles and contradictions that shape us. Moral constructivism. Moral constructivism is the philosophical theory that moral principles are not discovered or given by some external source, such as God or objective reality, but are instead constructed by individuals or societies through rational deliberation and agreement. According to this view, moral truths are not universal or fixed, but are shaped by human reasoning and collective choices. In essence, moral principles are created through a process of social and individual construction, where humans come together to define what is right and wrong based on mutual respect, fairness, and shared values. What makes moral constructivism so emotionally stirring is the profound implication it has on how we view moral responsibility. It suggests that ethics is not something imposed upon us, but something we actively participate in creating. This gives us a sense of agency, a responsibility to engage with others in dialogue, to challenge unjust norms, and to shape the moral frameworks that govern our lives. It forces us to ask difficult questions about the role we play in upholding or challenging societal values. However, this approach also brings a sense of discomfort. If moral principles are not objective, can they be trusted? Is there a risk of moral relativism, where anything can be justified based on personal or cultural preferences? The idea that moral truths are constructed rather than discovered challenges our deeply held belief in universal standards of right and wrong. It can stir feelings of uncertainty and instability about the very nature of justice, forcing us to reconsider what it means to live ethically in a world that is constantly changing and evolving. Moral constructivism doesn't just ask us to think about what is right, but to reflect on how we come to know what is right and the processes by which we, as individuals and societies, build our moral landscape. It calls on us to participate actively in this construction, shaping the moral fabric of the world around us. Aristotelian Ethics. Aristotelian ethics, rooted in the teachings of ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, presents a vision of morality centered on achieving eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or the good life. Unlike modern ethical systems that focus on following rules or maximizing pleasure, Aristotelian ethics emphasizes the cultivation of virtuous character traits that lead to a balanced, meaningful life. Aristotle believed that human beings achieve true happiness not through the pursuit of pleasure or wealth, but through living a life of virtue, acting in accordance with reason, and finding harmony between extremes. What makes Aristotelian ethics so emotionally compelling is its focus on personal growth and self-mastery. Aristotle's notion of virtue lies in the golden mean, the idea that virtue is found in the balance between excess and deficiency. For example, courage lies between the extremes of recklessness and cowardice. This approach places responsibility on individuals to cultivate and refine their character over time, engaging in practices that develop virtues like kindness, courage, and wisdom. It's a lifelong journey of self-improvement, one that requires not just intellectual understanding, but emotional commitment. The emotional depth of Aristotelian ethics is rooted in its view of human life as a complex, interconnected process of becoming. It challenges us to ask ourselves, are we living in alignment with our true nature? Are we striving to be the best versions of ourselves, not just for personal gain, but for the greater good of society? In a world that often prioritizes instant gratification, Aristotle's ethics reminds us that true happiness comes not from fleeting pleasures, but from a life of virtue, purpose, and community. It is a call to slow down, reflect, and dedicate ourselves to living thoughtfully and meaningfully. Authenticity, existentialism. In existentialist philosophy, authenticity refers to the idea of living in accordance with one's true self, free from the influences of societal expectations, conformity, and false narratives. It is the pursuit of personal freedom and the courage to live genuinely in a world often filled with distractions, pressures, and artificial roles. Authenticity is not merely about being honest with others. It's about being honest with oneself, acknowledging one's deepest desires, fears, and the responsibility one has to create meaning in life. What makes authenticity such a deeply emotional and compelling concept is that it confronts the existential anxiety that comes with self-awareness. To live authentically means to recognize and accept one's freedom to choose, but it also means grappling with the burden of those choices. There is no preordained path, no external blueprint for a meaningful life. Instead, each individual must create their own meaning through actions and decisions, knowing that their choices define who they are. The existentialist view of authenticity is often tied to the concept of bad faith, where individuals lie to themselves to escape the anxiety of freedom and responsibility. When we live in bad faith, we accept societal roles, expectations, and conventions without questioning them, hiding from the truth of our own freedom. Authenticity requires the courage to break free from these falsehoods and live with intention, even in the face of uncertainty and existential despair. This philosophy is emotionally gripping because it calls us to examine how much of our lives are truly ours and how much is shaped by the world around us. It invites us to reflect on the painful yet empowering truth that the essence of our existence is not given to us. It is something we must continually create. Moral bioenhancement. Moral bioenhancement is the controversial idea that biotechnology and genetic engineering could be used to improve human moral capacities. The theory suggests that through scientific advancements, we could enhance traits such as empathy, compassion, self-control, and fairness, leading to more ethically sound individuals and societies. Essentially, it raises the question, what if we could bioengineer a world where people are inherently more moral, where acts of kindness, altruism, and justice are not just aspirations, but deeply ingrained behaviors? What makes moral bioenhancement so emotionally gripping is the potential it holds to reshape human nature itself. The idea that we could scientifically guide individuals towards moral goodness strikes a chord in a world where ethical failures like greed, violence, and injustice are often prevalent. For many, the idea of creating a society where individuals are intrinsically motivated to act for the collective good is alluring, almost utopian. It suggests that we might transcend the limits of human nature, evolving into better, more empathetic versions of ourselves, free from the flaws that currently undermine moral decision-making. However, moral bioenhancement also stirs profound unease. The very notion of using technology to alter the core of human morality raises questions about autonomy and freedom. If morality can be engineered, who decides what is good? What happens to individuality in a world where our ethical instincts are no longer our own? These concerns tap into fears about the loss of agency and the potential for abuse, about a future where morality is imposed from above, shaping humanity into something more controlled, less human. The promise of a better, more moral world through bioenhancement is tantalizing, yet it also forces us to confront the deeper ethical dilemma. Can we truly improve upon nature, or are we playing with forces that could ultimately dehumanize us? Immaterialism. Immaterialism is the philosophical view that reality is fundamentally mental and that physical matter does not exist independently of the mind. According to immaterialism, the material world we experience is not composed of solid, independent substances, but is instead a collection of ideas or perceptions in the mind. The most famous proponent of immaterialism was George Berkeley, who famously argued, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived. In other words, objects exist only to the extent that they are perceived by a mind, and without perception, they have no independent existence. The emotional power of immaterialism lies in the dramatic shift it proposes about the nature of reality. Imagine a world where nothing truly exists outside of your perception, where the very fabric of reality depends entirely on consciousness. It forces us to question everything we thought we knew about the world around us, the trees, the sky, even other people. Could they be merely ideas in our minds? This concept can stir up feelings of awe as it challenges us to rethink the limits of human experience and consciousness. Yet, immaterialism can also provoke existential anxiety. If the world is simply a collection of perceptions, what does that mean for the existence of others? What does it mean for the permanence of things? The idea that everything is contingent on our minds shakes the foundation of our beliefs about the external world and our place within it. It raises unsettling questions about the nature of existence, reality, and perception. Immaterialism forces us to face the profound mystery of what is real, leading us into the depths of philosophical inquiry. It is a worldview that challenges us to look at everything with fresh eyes and reconsider the very nature of the universe. Aestheticism. Aestheticism is a philosophy that places the pursuit of beauty and sensory experience at the heart of human life. This movement, which flourished in the late 19th century, argues that art and beauty are valuable in and of themselves, independent of any moral, political, or practical concerns. The central belief of aestheticism is that life should be lived in accordance with the principles of beauty, and that the experience of art, music, literature, and nature has the power to elevate the soul and provide deeper meaning beyond the mundane struggles of everyday existence. What makes aestheticism so emotionally evocative is the liberation it offers from the conventional. In a world often preoccupied with productivity, morality, and utility, aestheticism invites us to step away from these pressures and immerse ourselves in the pure joy of beauty. It elevates art and the senses to a realm of transcendence, offering solace in a world that may seem dreary and monotonous. Imagine the deep satisfaction of listening to a piece of music, seeing a painting, or experiencing nature's wonders without any pressure to derive practical or moral value from it, only the pure pleasure of its beauty. Yet, the philosophy of aestheticism also raises complex questions about the role of beauty in our lives. If beauty is the highest good, what happens to other human experiences like love, struggle, or social responsibility? Is it possible to live a meaningful life purely through aesthetic experiences, or do we risk detaching ourselves from the deeper, more painful realities of existence? Aestheticism offers a deeply emotional connection to the world, one that encourages us to find meaning in the beauty around us and embrace art as a transformative experience, but it also forces us to consider what, if anything, lies beyond the surface of beauty itself. Kant's kingdom of ends. Kant's kingdom of ends is a profound ethical concept introduced by Immanuel Kant in his moral philosophy. It represents an ideal moral community where every individual acts according to the principle that each person is treated as an end in themselves, never merely as a means to an end. In this kingdom, everyone respects the inherent dignity and autonomy of others, recognizing that each person has their own goals, desires, and moral worth. The kingdom of ends is not a physical place, but a moral vision where the universal moral law, the categorical imperative, governs all interactions. What makes this concept emotionally powerful is its call for respect and moral equality. It challenges us to imagine a world where the worth of every individual is valued equally and where no one is exploited or manipulated for personal gain. In Kant's view, this is the ultimate moral community, a place where each person has the freedom to pursue their own goals, but only in a way that respects the freedom of others to do the same. This ideal society requires that we treat each other not as tools to achieve our desires, but as beings with inherent worth. Kant's kingdom of ends resonates deeply because it forces us to confront how often we fall short of this ideal in our everyday lives. In a world where power dynamics, exploitation, and manipulation are all too common, the idea of a kingdom of ends evokes both a sense of hope and a challenge. It pushes us to consider how we might live more ethically, treating each person with the respect and dignity they deserve. It's a call to create a world where moral principles aren't just theoretical, but are embodied in our actions and relationships. Coherence, theory of truth. The coherence theory of truth is a philosophical approach to understanding truth that suggests that something is true if it coheres or is consistent with a set of beliefs or propositions. Unlike the correspondence theory, which holds that truth corresponds to an objective reality, the coherence theory asserts that the truth of a belief is determined by how well it fits within an entire system of interconnected ideas. If a belief aligns with and supports other accepted beliefs within a coherent system, it is considered true. What makes the coherence theory of truth emotionally compelling is its emphasis on unity and consistency. It offers comfort in a world often filled with conflicting truths and perspectives. Imagine navigating through life, constantly encountering opposing viewpoints, each claiming to be the truth. The coherence theory offers a way to make sense of this chaos by suggesting that truth doesn't always need to match an external reality, but can be understood as a harmonious relationship between ideas. It brings a sense of order and structure, where truth is not a solitary, isolated fact, but a web of interrelated ideas that reinforce and support one another. Yet, the coherence theory also stirs discomfort, as it calls into question the very nature of truth itself. If truth is defined by coherence rather than correspondence to the external world, what happens when different systems of belief create their own truths? How do we judge between competing systems when each may feel equally coherent to its followers? The theory challenges us to consider the fluid and subjective nature of truth, forcing us to confront the unsettling reality that truth might not be as absolute or fixed as we would like to believe. It challenges our deeply held assumptions about objectivity and compels us to rethink what we truly know about the world. Indeterminacy of translation. The indeterminacy of translation is the philosophical concept that there is no objective, definitive way to translate one language into another. Proposed by philosopher W.V. O'Quine, this theory suggests that words and meanings do not have a fixed, universal interpretation across different languages or cultures. When we translate from one language to another, there are always multiple, equally valid ways to understand and interpret the meaning of a word or phrase. This ambiguity arises because meanings are deeply shaped by context, culture, and individual experiences. What makes the indeterminacy of translation so emotionally compelling is its challenge to our basic assumptions about language and communication. We often take for granted that words carry clear, universally understood meanings, that when we speak, others truly understand us in the exact way we intend. But the indeterminacy of translation forces us to confront the fact that meaning is never fully stable or absolute. It suggests that language is, at best, an approximation of thought, and that we can never be entirely sure that our interpretation of someone else's words reflects their true meaning. This uncertainty can provoke a sense of disorientation and doubt. If translation is inherently indeterminate, does that mean communication itself is fundamentally flawed or incomplete? Are we truly able to understand one another, or are we forever trapped in our own subjective interpretations? On the other hand, the theory can also be liberating, reminding us of the flexibility and richness of language and the possibility for creative interpretation and dialogue across cultural boundaries. The indeterminacy of translation forces us to grapple with the limitations of language and the complexity of meaning. It challenges us to think deeply about how we communicate, how we understand others, and whether true, absolute meaning is ever truly achievable. It opens the door to a more nuanced view of human interaction, one where translation, both literal and metaphorical, is always an imperfect process, shaped by the dynamic interplay of mind, culture, and language. Islamic philosophy. Islamic philosophy is a rich and complex tradition that emerged in the early centuries of Islam, blending the spiritual teachings of the Quran with the intellectual legacies of ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian thought. At its heart, Islamic philosophy seeks to reconcile faith with reason, presenting a worldview where divine revelation and human rationality can coexist and complement one another. This philosophical tradition delves into questions about the nature of God, the universe, ethics, and human existence, offering profound insights that continue to shape both religious and secular thought in the Muslim world. What makes Islamic philosophy so emotionally compelling is its emphasis on the search for knowledge as a spiritual and moral endeavor. Philosophers like Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes argued that reason could lead humanity closer to God, suggesting that understanding the natural world through science, logic, and philosophy is a way to better appreciate the Creator's wisdom. This view elevates intellectual pursuit not as something purely academic or detached from life, but as a path to spiritual enlightenment, encouraging individuals to seek knowledge with humility and reverence. However, Islamic philosophy also wrestles with profound existential questions, such as the nature of free will versus divine predestination and the ethical challenges of human agency. The tension between faith and reason is a recurring theme where thinkers strive to understand how God's will interacts with human autonomy. This duality creates a sense of emotional intensity as it asks individuals to balance their spiritual convictions with their intellectual pursuits, forcing them to confront their place in a vast, ordered universe that is both divinely governed and intellectually comprehensible. At its core, Islamic philosophy is a deeply emotional and intellectual journey that challenges its followers to integrate their faith with reason, striving for a deeper understanding of both the divine and the natural world. It invites us to consider how knowledge, spirituality, and morality intersect, urging us to reflect on the true purpose of our existence in a universe that is both wondrous and awe-inspiring.
Libertarian paternalism.
Libertarian paternalism is a controversial concept in political philosophy and behavioral economics that suggests it is possible to influence people's choices for their own good while still preserving their freedom to choose. It combines two seemingly contradictory ideas: libertarianism, which advocates for minimal government intervention and maximum individual freedom, and paternalism, which involves intervening in people's decisions to promote their well-being. The core of libertarian paternalism is the idea that we can nudge people toward better decisions without coercion by structuring choices in a way that aligns with their long-term interests while still leaving them free to choose otherwise. What makes libertarian paternalism emotionally compelling is its delicate balance between freedom and guidance. It challenges the traditional view that any form of intervention is an infringement on personal autonomy. Instead, it suggests that small, thoughtful changes in the way options are presented, like changing default settings, simplifying choices, or offering subtle guidance, can help individuals make decisions that are in their best interest, even when they might not realize it at the moment. For example, automatically enrolling employees in a retirement savings plan, but allowing them to opt out respects their freedom while nudging them toward financial security. However, the emotional tension in libertarian paternalism arises from its potential ethical dilemmas. How much influence is too much? Where is the line between helpful nudging and manipulation? This concept forces us to reflect on the balance between autonomy and well-being, and how far we should go in shaping the choices of others, even when it's for their own good. It raises profound questions about trust, freedom, and the role of institutions in guiding human behavior. Idealized rationalism. Idealized rationalism is the belief that human reasoning, when exercised properly and without interference from emotion, bias, or external factors, can lead us to objective truths and the best possible understanding of the world. It posits that by relying on pure, untainted logic and rational thought, we can transcend subjective experiences and cultural biases, arriving at universally applicable conclusions. This view elevates reason as the ultimate tool for human progress, aiming to shape a world governed by clear logical principles and coherent systems of thought. What makes idealized rationalism so emotionally provocative is its promise of clarity and certainty in a world often filled with ambiguity and confusion. It speaks to our deepest desires for order and understanding, especially in times of crisis or uncertainty. The idea that through reason we could solve the world's problems and unlock universal truths can feel deeply empowering. It offers a vision of human capability where logic and reason are the guiding lights, pushing us toward progress, justice, and intellectual enlightenment. Yet, idealized rationalism also evokes a sense of limitation and potential danger. By elevating reason above all else, it risks sidelining the emotional, social, and cultural dimensions of human life that often shape our understanding of truth. It forces us to confront the unsettling idea that when reason is idealized and detached from lived experiences, it can become cold, impersonal, and even oppressive. Rationalism's promise of objective truth can also feel alienating, as it suggests that our personal truths, shaped by feelings, intuition, and context, are secondary to a higher, impersonal logic. In the end, idealized rationalism stirs a conflict between the allure of pure reason and the richness of human experience, asking whether it is truly possible to live a meaningful life governed solely by rational thought.
Pantheism.
Pantheism is the belief that the universe itself is divine, that God and nature are not separate entities but are one and the same. In this view, everything in existence, from the stars above to the grass beneath our feet, is an expression of the divine. It is not that God created the world and then distanced himself from it, but rather God is inherent in every part of the world, in every atom, every leaf, and every being. To experience the world is to experience the divine. What makes pantheism emotionally compelling is the sense of connection it provides. Imagine standing on a mountain, feeling the wind against your face and the earth beneath your feet, and realizing that this very experience is divine. There's a deep spiritual unity that emerges from this perspective, a feeling of being intimately connected with everything around you. Every tree, every river, every animal, each is part of a greater whole, a sacred existence. Pantheism challenges the separation between the sacred and the mundane, urging us to see divinity not as a distant, separate being, but as something that is immanent in all things. It asks us to reconsider our relationship with nature not as something to conquer or exploit, but as something to revere and respect. In a world where many feel disconnected or alienated, pantheism offers a profound sense of belonging, reminding us that we are part of a greater cosmic order. However, the idea can also provoke unease. If everything is divine, what does that mean for human suffering or the darker aspects of life? Can divinity truly be found in the pain and chaos of existence? Pantheism forces us to confront these difficult questions, making it a philosophy that is as emotionally stirring as it is spiritually expansive. Epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice is a concept that explores the ways in which individuals or groups are wronged in their capacity as knowers. It arises when someone's knowledge, experiences, or testimony are devalued or dismissed simply because of their identity, such as their gender, race, or social status. The philosopher Miranda Fricker, who coined the term, identified two primary types of epistemic injustice: testimonial injustice, where a speaker is not trusted or believed due to prejudice, and hermeneutical injustice, where someone's ability to make sense of their own experiences is hindered by a lack of interpretive resources in society. What makes epistemic injustice so emotionally powerful is its deep connection to human dignity and self-worth. To have your knowledge disregarded or to be denied the opportunity to express your experience is to be treated as less than human. Imagine the frustration of being unable to communicate your own truth or having your voice silenced simply because others refuse to see you as a valid source of knowledge. This kind of injustice denies individuals the recognition they deserve as capable knowers, leaving them isolated and marginalized in society. Epistemic injustice is particularly poignant because it reveals how knowledge is not just an abstract, impartial process, but is intertwined with power dynamics. It forces us to confront the ways in which society privileges certain voices while silencing others, and how this undermines the very foundations of justice and equality. For those who experience epistemic injustice, it is not just a matter of being ignored. It is an existential wound, one that undermines their sense of belonging and their place in the world. The emotional intensity of epistemic injustice lies in its pervasive impact on personal identity and social engagement. It speaks to our innate need to be heard, understood, and respected in our knowledge. Addressing it requires not only changing how we listen to others, but rethinking how we structure our social systems and relationships, ensuring that everyone's voice is given the recognition and authority it deserves. Clifford's Principle. Clifford's Principle, articulated by philosopher William K. Clifford, asserts that it is morally wrong to believe anything without sufficient evidence. According to Clifford, our beliefs should not be based on faith, tradition, or emotion, but on a foundation of reason and evidence. He famously argued, "It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence." This powerful principle challenges our everyday practices of belief, urging us to examine the ethical consequences of holding convictions without solid proof. The emotional weight of Clifford's Principle lies in its call for intellectual honesty and moral responsibility. It forces us to confront the discomforting idea that many of our most cherished beliefs may be unsupported by evidence. Whether religious faith, political ideologies, or personal opinions, Clifford suggests that believing without evidence isn't just a logical flaw, it's a moral failing. This principle stirs deep reflection because it questions the foundation of what we hold true and forces us to evaluate the integrity of our own convictions. Are we truly justifying what we believe, or are we accepting ideas on autopilot? What makes Clifford's Principle so emotionally compelling is its direct challenge to how we live our lives. It asks us to consider the profound impact of our beliefs, not just on ourselves, but on others. Beliefs, especially when held without evidence, can lead to harmful consequences, perpetuating ignorance, prejudice, and division. This principle pushes us to recognize that the search for truth is not only an intellectual endeavor, but also a moral one. It reminds us that belief has power, and with that power comes the responsibility to ensure that our convictions are grounded in reality. Applied Ethics. Applied ethics is the branch of moral philosophy that deals with the practical application of ethical principles to real-world situations. Unlike abstract ethical theories that focus on theoretical debates about right and wrong, applied ethics addresses concrete moral issues such as medical ethics, business ethics, environmental ethics, and human rights. It asks questions like, what should we do in the face of a moral dilemma? How do we navigate complex issues where ethical guidelines aren't clear? And how can we make decisions that respect both individuals and society? What makes applied ethics so emotionally compelling is its direct impact on the choices we make every day. It brings philosophical concepts out of the realm of academia and into our lives, challenging us to act ethically when faced with real-world problems. In moments of moral uncertainty, whether deciding on the best course of action in healthcare, evaluating corporate responsibility, or confronting social justice issues, applied ethics provides a framework for making decisions that feel just and fair. It's the bridge between theory and action, offering us a way to live out our moral beliefs in ways that can have tangible effects on individuals, communities, and the world. However, applied ethics can also stir discomfort. It forces us to confront difficult realities, such as when the right thing to do isn't always the easiest thing to do, or when ethical principles conflict with one another. Applied ethics doesn't offer neat black and white answers. It demands that we navigate moral gray areas where the best choice may involve compromise, uncertainty, or even sacrifice. It challenges us to confront the messiness of human existence and the complexities of modern life, pushing us to consider the consequences of our actions on a deeper, more profound level. Frugality Principle. The Frugality Principle, in its philosophical sense, asserts that we should seek simplicity and efficiency in our actions, choices, and beliefs. It emphasizes the idea of achieving the maximum possible outcome with the least amount of resources, effort, or complexity. This principle is often applied to problem-solving, ethics, and decision-making, advocating for minimalism, not just in material possessions, but in the way we approach life's challenges. The Frugality Principle encourages a mindset where we strip away excess and focus on what truly matters. What makes the Frugality Principle emotionally compelling is its appeal to our desire for clarity and purpose. In a world that often feels overwhelming, where choices are abundant and distractions endless, the idea of simplifying things, of focusing only on what is essential, feels like a breath of fresh air. It promises a return to a more meaningful, intentional way of living, where the noise of modern life fades away, leaving behind only the things that truly serve our happiness and well-being. On a deeper level, the Frugality Principle can be liberating. It frees us from the endless pursuit of more possessions, more achievements, more validation, and instead asks us to focus on less. It encourages us to find satisfaction in the simple, the modest, the quiet moments of life. But it also comes with challenges. Stripping away excess can expose the discomfort of facing what we truly need versus what we think we want. It forces us to confront our values and question the societal pressures that push us toward constant accumulation. Ultimately, the Frugality Principle touches on a profound truth that sometimes less is more. It calls us to live with intention and mindfulness, to find richness in simplicity, and to recognize that fulfillment doesn't come from excess, but from focusing on what truly matters. Deconstruction. Derrida. Your deconstruction, a philosophical approach developed by Jacques Derrida, is a powerful and unsettling method for analyzing language, meaning, and truth. At its core, deconstruction challenges the idea that words and concepts have fixed meanings. Derrida argued that meaning is always unstable, shaped by the relationships between words, and that language is inherently fragmented. Deconstruction reveals how our understanding of texts, ideas, and even our reality is built on layers of assumptions, contradictions, and exclusions, urging us to question the structures of thought we often take for granted. What makes deconstruction so emotionally gripping is the way it forces us to confront the fragility of everything we believe to be stable and true. It shows us that meanings are never absolute, but are instead constantly deferred, always shifting in relation to other meanings. Imagine the unsettling realization that the words we rely on to make sense of the world are never as solid as we thought. They are always unstable, always open to interpretation. This realization shakes the very foundation of knowledge, truth, and communication, leaving us in a state of perpetual questioning. Deconstruction is not about destroying meaning, but about exposing the complexities and contradictions embedded within the structures of meaning itself. Derrida's work invites us to explore how language shapes our understanding of power, identity, and society. It demands a radical rethinking of how we relate to texts, to others, and to ourselves. The emotional impact of deconstruction is profound because it challenges the way we relate to the world, urging us to embrace ambiguity, uncertainty, and the endless potential for reinterpretation. It calls us to recognize that meaning is never fixed. It is always evolving, always dependent on context, and always a product of ongoing dialogue. Common sense realism. Common sense realism is a philosophical perspective that asserts that the world exists independently of our perceptions, and that our sensory experiences provide a reliable basis for understanding reality. This view suggests that the world is largely as it appears to us. Objects have properties such as color, texture, and shape, and these qualities are not illusions or constructs of the mind. Common sense realism is rooted in the belief that the way we perceive the world through our senses is a reflection of the world as it truly is. The emotional power of common sense realism lies in its intuitive appeal. It resonates with our everyday experiences. When we touch an object, we feel its solidity. When we look at the sky, we see its vastness. This philosophy aligns with our natural instincts, which make it feel right on a visceral level. We want to believe that the world is as it seems, that our perceptions reflect reality, and that our senses provide us with a trustworthy map of the world. However, what makes common sense realism emotionally provocative is that it confronts the deeper philosophical dilemmas about perception and reality. It invites us to question, can we really trust what we see and feel? What if our senses are deceiving us? This challenge stirs both comfort and discomfort. On one hand, common sense realism offers a sense of security and certainty in a world full of ambiguity. On the other, it asks us to confront the possibility that our perceptions might not be as reliable as we believe. It forces us to reconcile the simplicity of everyday experience with the complexities of philosophical doubt, creating a profound tension between the immediate world we perceive and the deeper truths we seek. Constructivist Epistemology. Constructivist epistemology is a theory of knowledge that suggests our understanding of the world is not passively received, but actively constructed by the mind. According to this view, knowledge is built through interactions with our environment, shaped by personal experiences, social contexts, and cultural influences. Rather than discovering objective truths that exist independently of us, we create meaning through our own mental frameworks, integrating new experiences with what we already know. In this sense, reality is not a fixed external entity to be observed, but something we actively interpret and understand. What makes constructivist epistemology emotionally compelling is its recognition of the richness of human experience. It celebrates the idea that knowledge is dynamic, constantly evolving as we engage with the world around us. This view resonates deeply because it acknowledges that each individual's perception of the world is unique, shaped by their background, culture, and experiences. It empowers us to see ourselves as active participants in the creation of knowledge, rather than passive recipients of fixed truths. It tells us that the way we think, the way we perceive, and the way we understand the world is shaped by our interactions, our questions, and our interpretations. However, constructivist epistemology also stirs discomfort because it challenges the very idea of objective truth. If knowledge is constructed and shaped by personal experience, what happens to the concept of universal truths that apply to everyone? This raises unsettling questions about the reliability of our perceptions, especially when different people interpret the same reality in vastly different ways. It forces us to confront the fact that our understanding of the world may be limited, subjective, and ever-changing, an idea that can be both liberating and disorienting, as it calls into question the very foundations of what we believe to be true. Creative evolution, Bergson. Creative evolution, a concept introduced by the French philosopher Henri Bergson, challenges the traditional mechanistic view of evolution by proposing that life is driven by an underlying creative force that cannot be fully explained by the laws of science or biology alone. For Bergson, evolution is not a purely mechanical or deterministic process of survival and adaptation, but rather a dynamic, unpredictable unfolding of life that is guided by an inherent creative impulse. This impulse, which he calls élan vital, vital force, is what gives life its spontaneity, novelty, and ability to adapt in ways that go beyond mere biological necessity. The emotional impact of creative evolution is profound, as it evokes a sense of wonder and awe toward the complexity and unpredictability of life. Unlike the cold, mechanical view of evolution as a series of calculated, incremental changes, Bergson's philosophy emphasizes the organic, fluid nature of life's development. It suggests that life is more than just a series of adaptations to external conditions. It is a creative process that cannot be reduced to simple physical or chemical laws. This concept invites us to see life itself as a dynamic, ever-evolving creation, full of potential and possibilities. What makes creative evolution especially compelling is the sense of mystery and purpose it brings to our understanding of existence. It suggests that there is more to life than what meets the eye, that there is a hidden creative force guiding the development of life, constantly pushing it toward new and unexpected forms. This idea challenges us to look at life not as a predictable process, but as a beautiful, unpredictable journey shaped by a deeper, almost mystical energy. It reminds us that creation, both in nature and in human life, is always in flux, always evolving, and always full of potential. The general will, Rousseau. The concept of the general will, introduced by philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, is one of the most influential and emotionally stirring ideas in political philosophy. In Rousseau's vision, the general will is the collective will of the people, the expression of what is best for the society as a whole. It is not simply the sum of individual desires, but a unified, collective interest that transcends personal self-interest. For Rousseau, true freedom is found not in pursuing personal desires, but in aligning oneself with the general will, which represents the common good of all. What makes the idea of the general will so emotionally impactful is its radical reimagining of freedom and community. Rousseau argues that to be truly free, individuals must give up their own particular wills and submit to the collective will of the people. This concept suggests that genuine freedom is not about personal autonomy or individual rights, but about the alignment with a shared, communal purpose that benefits all. The emotional charge of this idea is powerful, as it calls us to consider the sacrifices we must make for the greater good and questions the very notion of individualism that underpins modern society. However, the general will also raises unsettling questions. What happens when the collective will of the people goes against the desires of the individual? Can the general will ever truly reflect the interests of every person in society, or does it risk becoming a tool of oppression where the majority imposes its will on the minority? Rousseau's vision challenges us to think deeply about the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility, and whether true harmony can ever exist between the two. The general will is both inspiring and thought-provoking, offering a vision of a society bound together by a common purpose, but it also forces us to confront the tension between personal freedom and social unity, leaving us to question how far we are willing to go for the sake of the collective good. Individuation, philosophy. Individuation is a concept in philosophy that refers to the process by which an individual becomes distinct and separate from others, developing their own unique identity. This idea, deeply explored by thinkers like Carl Jung and Henri Bergson, suggests that true selfhood arises from the integration of various psychological, social, and cultural forces into a cohesive and distinct individual. It's not simply about separating oneself from others, but about realizing and expressing one's own individuality, shaped by both internal desires and external experiences. What makes individuation so emotionally compelling is its profound connection to the human struggle for self-realization in a world that constantly pulls us in different directions through societal expectations, familial roles, and cultural norms. The journey of individuation is both empowering and deeply personal. It is the process through which we come to understand who we truly are, not by following a predefined path, but by reconciling our inner contradictions and finding harmony within ourselves. This process is not always smooth or comfortable. It involves facing the shadows of our own psyche, confronting doubts, and sometimes enduring conflict, but it is through this struggle that we become fully ourselves. The emotional impact of individuation comes from its ability to connect us to our deeper selves. It invites us to ask the question, who am I, beyond the roles I play and the expectations placed upon me? The concept forces us to reckon with the complexity of identity and to embrace the sometimes painful yet profoundly rewarding journey toward becoming our authentic selves. Individuation is not just a philosophical idea. It's a deeply human experience that challenges us to grow and evolve, embracing both our uniqueness and our connection to the world around us. Cultural philosophy. Cultural philosophy is the exploration of how culture shapes human thought, behavior, and identity. It investigates the deep connections between culture and the ways in which we understand the world around us. Culture, in this sense, is not just about art, traditions, or practices. It's a dynamic force that influences everything from our worldview to our moral frameworks, our perceptions of right and wrong, and even how we construct meaning in our lives. Cultural philosophy seeks to understand how ideas, beliefs, and values are transmitted through society and how they, in turn, shape both individual lives and collective histories. What makes cultural philosophy emotionally gripping is its recognition that we are all products of the cultures in which we live, yet we also have the power to influence and change the cultural landscapes around us. It forces us to confront the profound impact culture has on our thoughts, actions, and even our very identities. Whether we recognize it or not, our personal experiences, our beliefs about justice, family, love, and society are deeply rooted in cultural contexts that extend far beyond our own individual lives. This realization can be both liberating and unsettling, as it challenges us to see how much of what we believe to be truth is actually shaped by the broader cultural narratives we're a part of. Cultural philosophy also stirs a deep sense of empathy, urging us to appreciate the diversity of human experience and the multiplicity of worldviews that exist across time and space. At the same time, it can provoke discomfort as it asks us to question the cultural norms and assumptions we take for granted, pushing us to reflect on whether we are unconsciously perpetuating systems of thought that limit, rather than expand, human potential. Through this lens, culture becomes not just a backdrop to our lives, but the very framework through which we make sense of the world. Causality. Causality is the philosophical concept that suggests everything that happens is the result of a cause or a series of causes. It's the principle that events in the world are not random or disconnected, but are linked in a chain of cause and effect. This fundamental idea helps us make sense of the world by allowing us to understand the relationships between actions and their consequences. When we observe an event, we instinctively ask, what caused this? The search for causes is at the heart of scientific inquiry, moral reasoning, and even everyday life. What makes the concept of causality so emotionally stirring is the sense of control and understanding it provides. When we identify the cause of a problem, we feel empowered to address it. The idea that everything has a cause makes the world feel more predictable, more manageable, and, in some ways, more just. If we know the causes behind our actions, we can better shape the outcomes of our lives. This belief brings comfort in knowing that things happen for reasons, even if we don't always understand them immediately. But causality also raises deeply unsettling questions. If everything has a cause, does that mean everything is determined by forces beyond our control? Are we just the product of preceding causes, or do we have the power to break free from the chain of causality? This can be an existentially disorienting idea, challenging our sense of free will and moral responsibility. The more we delve into causality, the more we confront our limitations, our inability to truly control the forces that shape our lives. Causality forces us to confront the delicate balance between control and chaos, to examine the intricate web of cause and effect that defines our existence, and to reflect on whether we are the masters of our own fate or simply actors in an endless chain of events. Empathy, philosophy of mind. Empathy, in the philosophy of mind, is the capacity to understand and share the feelings of others. It goes beyond mere sympathy. It's the ability to not only recognize another's emotional state, but to feel it alongside them. Philosophically, empathy raises profound questions about consciousness, the nature of the self, and our connection to others. How do we experience the emotions of others as if they were our own? And, more deeply, how can we ever truly know the inner experiences of another person when all we have access to is our own consciousness? What makes empathy so emotionally powerful in philosophy is that it challenges the boundaries between self and other. It confronts the illusion of separateness, how we see ourselves as distinct, individual entities, and yet, when we truly empathize, we feel a shared connection with others. The experience of empathy can be deeply moving, as it opens up the possibility of truly understanding another person's pain, joy, or confusion, as though their emotions are intertwined with ours. Yet, empathy also brings with it a certain vulnerability. By connecting with another person's emotions, we expose ourselves to their pain or suffering, making us susceptible to emotional overwhelm. This makes the capacity for empathy a double-edged sword. It can foster profound human connection, but also leave us feeling raw, exposed, and helpless in the face of another's emotional turmoil. In exploring empathy, we are forced to confront our own emotional limits, questioning how much of another's world we can truly access. Empathy in the philosophy of mind compels us to ask, how do we bridge the gap between our internal, private experience and the external, shared reality of others? It offers a window into the complexity of human relationships, showing us how deeply intertwined our emotional lives can be, even as we struggle to truly understand one another. Process philosophy. Process philosophy is a school of thought that sees change, becoming, and dynamism as the central features of reality. Rather than viewing the universe as a static collection of objects, process philosophy, inspired by the work of Alfred North Whitehead, emphasizes that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux. According to this view, the essence of being is not found in permanence or fixed states, but in the ongoing process of transformation and development. Nothing is simply being in an eternal sense. Everything is in the process of becoming something else. The emotional power of process philosophy lies in its radical challenge to our intuitive understanding of the world. It forces us to confront the reality that everything we hold still and fixed, our relationships, our identities, even the world around us, are not as solid as we believe. This realization can feel liberating or unsettling, depending on how we view the flow of time and change. On one hand, it offers freedom, suggesting that nothing is predetermined and that we have the ability to evolve and shape our own becoming. On the other hand, it forces us to confront the uncertainty and instability that comes with constant change. What makes process philosophy so emotionally resonant is the way it reflects the deeply human experience of growth, struggle, and adaptation. We are all in a state of becoming, not simply a fixed endpoint. This invites us to accept the unpredictable nature of existence and find meaning in the very act of becoming, rather than in static achievement. It challenges us to embrace change, not as a force to resist, but as the fundamental nature of life itself. Through this lens, the impermanence and transformation of life are not things to fear, but vital processes that give existence its richness and depth. Instrumentalism. Instrumentalism is a philosophical approach to understanding knowledge and truth that focuses on the practical utility of ideas, theories, and concepts. It asserts that the value of a theory or belief lies not in whether it accurately describes reality, but in how effectively it helps us navigate and predict experiences in the world. In this view, theories and concepts are tools, instrumental in achieving certain goals or solving problems, rather than mirrors of an objective reality. If a theory works, if it helps us achieve desired outcomes, then it is considered true in a pragmatic sense, regardless of whether it accurately corresponds to an external world. What makes instrumentalism emotionally compelling is its emphasis on practical outcomes and real-world application. It taps into our innate desire for solutions, for knowledge that leads to action and progress. The idea that truth can be defined by what is useful speaks to our need to make sense of the world in ways that lead to tangible results. This approach values results over abstraction, which can be a relief in a world often dominated by complex, theoretical debates that seem disconnected from daily life. However, instrumentalism can also provoke discomfort, as it challenges the traditional view of truth as an objective, independent reality. If truth is merely what works, what happens to concepts like accuracy or authenticity? What does it mean for our understanding of the world if the theories we rely on aren't aiming to reflect reality, but simply to get results? The emotional tension of instrumentalism lies in its pragmatic flexibility, which can feel freeing but also unsettling, as it forces us to ask whether the truths we live by are merely tools for convenience, rather than reflections of an enduring, objective reality. Social justice. Social justice is the philosophical concept that seeks to create a society in which individuals have equal access to resources, opportunities, and rights, regardless of their race, gender, class, or background. It's a vision of fairness and equity that strives to eliminate disparities in wealth, power, and social status. Social justice challenges societal structures that perpetuate inequality, urging us to address the systemic factors that contribute to discrimination and oppression. It calls for a redistribution of power and resources to ensure that all individuals can live with dignity and have the chance to thrive. The emotional power of social justice lies in its deep connection to human compassion and empathy. It speaks to our innate sense of right and wrong, triggering feelings of outrage when we witness injustice and inspiring hope when we see the possibility of change. Social justice is driven by the belief that every person deserves a fair shot at a good life, free from the constraints imposed by unjust systems. It is a call for a world where everyone's potential can be realized, and where the marginalized and oppressed are not just tolerated, but valued and empowered. Yet, social justice is also a deeply contentious concept. It can stir powerful emotions of frustration, anger, and resistance, particularly among those who feel that social justice efforts challenge their privilege or threaten their way of life. For some, the redistribution of resources and power feels like an unjust demand, a disruption of the status quo that has benefited them. For others, it is an urgent moral imperative, an ethical call to right the wrongs that have been ingrained in society for centuries. Social justice forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality, privilege, and the systems that perpetuate injustice. It challenges us to take responsibility for the collective well-being of society and to question the structures that govern our lives, pushing us to work toward a world that is more just, more equal, and more compassionate for all. Cosmology and philosophy. Cosmology and philosophy intersect in a profound way as both seek to answer fundamental questions about the nature of the universe, our place within it, and the underlying principles governing existence. While cosmology is the scientific study of the origins, structure, and evolution of the cosmos, philosophy probes the deeper metaphysical, epistemological, and ethical implications of these findings. Cosmological theories such as the Big Bang or the multiverse invite us to reflect on questions that extend far beyond the empirical, questions about meaning, purpose, and the limits of human knowledge. What makes the fusion of cosmology and philosophy so emotionally stirring is the vastness of the questions it tackles. The more we learn about the universe, the more we are confronted with its mystery. Are we alone in this infinite expanse, or is there a deeper interconnectedness between all things? Does the universe have an inherent purpose, or is it a random series of events? These questions trigger a deep sense of awe and wonder, as well as existential anxiety, as we realize how small and temporary our lives are in the face of an ancient, boundless universe. Cosmology forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. The more we discover, the more we are made aware of how little we truly know. The vast scale of the universe and its origins can evoke a humbling sense of insignificance, yet it also invites a sense of awe, an appreciation for the beauty and mystery of the cosmos that transcends our limited human perspective. In exploring these ideas philosophically, we are called to grapple with the very nature of reality itself and our place within it, searching for meaning in a universe that may be both unfathomable and deeply connected to our own existence.
Moral nihilism.
Moral nihilism is the philosophical view that moral values and principles do not have objective existence or inherent truth. According to this perspective, there is no such thing as right or wrong in an absolute sense, and no moral facts exist that can guide human behavior in a universal way. Instead, moral claims are seen as human constructions, subjective judgments, or mere social conventions, with no grounding in objective reality. In essence, moral nihilism denies the validity of moral judgments, suggesting that nothing is morally significant beyond individual preferences or societal agreements. The emotional impact of moral nihilism is profound because it forces us to face a deep, unsettling truth. If moral values are not objectively grounded, then our actions, relationships, and choices may lack any inherent meaning or moral weight. This view can feel liberating for those tired of rigid moral systems or dogmas, offering a sense of freedom to live according to personal desires rather than universal principles. Yet, it can also provoke anxiety and existential despair as it challenges the foundation upon which many people base their sense of meaning, justice, and purpose in life. Moral nihilism asks us to consider what happens when the moral framework that guides our lives is revealed as fragile or arbitrary. It raises questions about how we should act in a world without clear moral direction. Can we find meaning in our choices if there is no ultimate moral order? For many, the concept of moral nihilism stirs a profound existential tension, offering both a sense of freedom and a confrontation with the daunting implications of living in a morally indifferent universe.
Existential psychoanalysis.
Existential psychoanalysis is a form of psychotherapy that combines the insights of existential philosophy with the methods of psychoanalysis to explore the deep, often painful aspects of the human condition. Rooted in existential thought, it focuses on understanding how individuals confront fundamental aspects of existence, such as freedom, isolation, death, and meaning. Unlike traditional psychoanalysis, which emphasizes unconscious drives and childhood experiences, Existential psychoanalysis encourages individuals to confront the anxieties and existential crises that arise from the awareness of life's inherent uncertainty and meaninglessness. What makes existential psychoanalysis emotionally powerful is its raw confrontation with the deepest, most unsettling aspects of our existence. It does not shy away from the uncomfortable truths about life, the fear of death, the burden of freedom, the loneliness of existence. This approach invites individuals to embrace their anxiety and uncertainty rather than seek to escape or repress it. In doing so, it offers the possibility of profound personal growth, suggesting that by fully confronting these existential realities, one can live more authentically and meaningfully. It calls us to take ownership of our choices and find our own purpose, even in a world that often seems devoid of inherent meaning. Existential psychoanalysis can also stir a deep sense of vulnerability and fear, confronting the fundamental questions of existence. Questions like, what is the purpose of life? Or, how do I face my inevitable death? Can be emotionally overwhelming. Yet, this very confrontation with the unknown can lead to liberation, as it offers the chance to live more fully, to experience life on one's own terms, free from the comforting illusions that might otherwise shield us from the truth of our own existence. It forces us to reckon with our deepest fears and desires, revealing the complex, fragile beauty of being truly alive. Moral luck. Moral luck is the philosophical concept that questions how much control we truly have over the morality of our actions and their consequences. It suggests that factors beyond our control, such as our circumstances, the timing of events, or sheer chance, can significantly influence how we are judged morally, even though we have no agency over them. For example, two drivers might both drive recklessly, but one hits a pedestrian while the other narrowly avoids an accident. Despite both engaging in the same morally questionable behavior, the one who causes harm is often judged more harshly. This raises the unsettling question, can we be morally responsible for things that happen through no fault of our own? What makes moral luck emotionally powerful is the deep sense of injustice it evokes. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that life is not always fair in the moral judgments we impose. How can it be just to hold someone accountable for something over which they had no control? The concept strikes at the heart of our notions of fairness and responsibility, challenging the idea that we can always control our actions' outcomes. It makes us reflect on the role of fate and circumstance in shaping our moral lives, forcing us to reckon with how much of who we are is shaped by things outside of our control. On the other hand, moral luck also brings a sense of vulnerability. It reminds us that our actions are always intertwined with the unpredictable nature of life. Even when we try to do everything right, factors beyond our control can alter the course of events and potentially lead to morally questionable outcomes. It's a sobering reflection on the limitations of human agency and the complexities of moral judgment. Moral luck forces us to reconsider the fairness of the moral systems we rely on and ask whether true moral responsibility can ever be entirely separate from the unpredictable forces that shape our lives. Externalism, epistemology. Externalism in epistemology is a compelling theory that challenges traditional views about the nature of knowledge, particularly the relationship between belief, justification, and the external world. According to externalism, the justification for our beliefs is not solely dependent on factors that are internal to the believer, such as their mental states or cognitive processes, but also on external factors outside of their direct awareness. This stands in contrast to internalism, which holds that a belief is only justified if the believer is aware of or has access to the reasons that justify it. What makes externalism emotionally gripping is that it forces us to confront the limits of self-knowledge and the role of the external world in shaping our understanding of truth. If our beliefs can be justified by factors beyond our control or awareness, it challenges the very idea that we are fully in charge of knowing what we know. This realization can be unsettling because it suggests that much of our knowledge may be shaped by elements outside our consciousness, whether it's the reliability of the world, the functioning of our cognitive faculties, or even the presence of a trustworthy environment. Externalism also raises thought-provoking questions about the nature of trust and certainty. How much of our knowledge is really our knowledge if it's so heavily dependent on external factors? And can we ever truly know if our beliefs are justified, or are we always in part at the mercy of forces beyond our understanding? Yet, there is a certain liberation in externalism. It opens up a richer, more complex understanding of knowledge, where truth is not merely a matter of introspection, but involves a deeper connection to the world. By embracing externalism, we come to recognize that knowledge is not an isolated, self-contained process. It is an interconnected, dynamic interaction between mind, environment, and reality itself. Moral luck. Moral luck is a concept in ethics that challenges the idea that individuals should only be judged for actions that are within their control. It suggests that factors beyond a person's control, such as circumstances, luck, or fate, can influence the moral assessment of their actions. In other words, even if someone acts with good intentions, the outcomes of their actions, often determined by luck, can affect how morally blameworthy or praiseworthy they are considered to be. This idea is deeply unsettling because it forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that we may be judged unfairly based on factors we cannot control. What makes moral luck so emotionally compelling is how it resonates with our sense of justice. We like to believe that people get what they deserve, that good actions lead to good outcomes, and bad actions lead to bad ones. But moral luck complicates this simple equation. Imagine two drivers. One drives recklessly and causes an accident, while the other drives recklessly but by sheer luck avoids a crash. According to moral luck, both may be judged similarly, despite the stark difference in the outcomes they faced. This notion challenges the fairness we expect from moral judgments and raises the uncomfortable question: how much control do we really have over our own moral fate? Moral luck stirs deep emotional responses because it calls into question the very foundation of responsibility and accountability. If outcomes can be influenced by factors outside our control, how fair is it to hold someone morally accountable for what they could not have predicted or avoided? This philosophical dilemma forces us to reconsider how we judge others and ourselves, challenging our assumptions about moral responsibility in a world full of uncertainty and chance. Ecocentrism. Ecocentrism is an environmental philosophy that places the environment and all its living and non-living components at the center of moral consideration. It argues that the natural world has intrinsic value, independent of human interests, and that human actions should be guided by the need to respect, preserve, and sustain the Earth's ecosystems. Rather than viewing nature as a resource to be exploited for human benefit, ecocentrism emphasizes that humans are just one part of a larger, interconnected web of life, and that the health of the planet as a whole is essential for the survival of all species, including ourselves. What makes ecocentrism so emotionally powerful is its radical rethinking of our place in the world. It calls us to acknowledge that we are not the masters of nature, but rather its stewards. It taps into a deep-seated longing for harmony with the earth, especially in a time when environmental degradation, climate change, and the loss of biodiversity are threatening the planet's future. Ecocentrism invites us to see ourselves not as separate from nature, but as part of it, urging us to respect the Earth's limits and to protect its integrity for future generations. However, ecocentrism also raises uncomfortable questions. If nature has intrinsic value, does that mean we must prioritize the well-being of animals, plants, and ecosystems over human interests? What sacrifices are we willing to make to protect the environment? And how do we balance ecological preservation with the needs of a growing global population? These questions force us to confront the tension between human development and environmental sustainability, stirring feelings of urgency, guilt, and responsibility. Yet, at its core, ecocentrism is a call to live more harmoniously with the earth, to recognize the deep interdependence of all life, and to fight for a world that honors the planet's well-being as much as our own. Liberal democracy. Liberal democracy is a political system that combines the principles of liberalism, emphasizing individual rights, freedoms, and equality, with the practice of democracy, where power is vested in the people through free and fair elections. In a liberal democracy, the government is accountable to its citizens, and fundamental rights such as freedom of speech, assembly, and religion are protected. It is a system designed to balance the need for collective decision-making with the protection of individual liberties, ensuring that all citizens have a voice in how they are governed. What makes liberal democracy so emotionally charged is its profound connection to ideals of freedom, justice, and equality. For many, liberal democracy represents the best of human aspirations, a political system where the government serves the people, where oppression is minimized, and where individuals can pursue their lives and beliefs without fear of coercion. It is a system that promises the potential for social progress, where the rule of law prevails, and where each person's rights are respected. Yet, liberal democracy is also a system fraught with challenges and contradictions. It forces us to confront the tension between majority rule and minority rights, between the will of the people and the protection of individual freedoms. In practice, liberal democracies often struggle with issues of inequality, political polarization, and the influence of powerful elites, leading some to question whether the system truly lives up to its ideals. The emotional conflict within liberal democracy stems from this tension, the hope for a fair and just system on one hand, and the reality of its flaws and limitations on the other. Liberal democracy challenges us to think about the nature of freedom, equality, and justice, and forces us to ask difficult questions about how power is distributed in society. It is a philosophy that calls for active participation, responsibility, and constant vigilance in protecting the rights of all citizens. Despite its imperfections, liberal democracy continues to be a powerful force for shaping our political world, inspiring both hope and disillusionment in equal measure. Pragmatic maxim. The pragmatic maxim, formulated by philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, is a powerful concept that shifts the focus of meaning and truth away from abstract, static definitions toward practical, real-world consequences. The maxim states that the meaning of any concept or idea lies in the practical effects it has on our experiences and actions. In other words, to understand what something truly means, we must consider the tangible outcomes it produces in the world. This approach places emphasis on what works in practice, rather than what might be theoretically or abstractly true. What makes the pragmatic maxim emotionally compelling is that it anchors knowledge and truth in the lived experience of human beings. It's a philosophy rooted in the real world, one that invites us to focus not just on lofty ideas or speculative theories, but on the concrete impact of our beliefs. Imagine trying to understand a concept or a belief, but instead of relying solely on definitions or arguments, you assess how it influences behavior, problem-solving, or decision-making in everyday life. This practical test of meaning makes philosophy feel more immediate and relevant to our daily lives. The maxim also offers a liberating sense of flexibility. It acknowledges that truth is not fixed, but is contingent upon the context and the results it produces. This means that ideas evolve as they are tested and applied, making knowledge a dynamic process rather than a static set of facts. For some, this is empowering. It's a reminder that truth is not about rigid dogma, but about finding what works in our constantly changing world. Yet, the pragmatic maxim also forces us to confront uncertainty and imperfection. If truth is defined by practical outcomes, then how do we deal with conflicting outcomes or ideas that seem to have no immediate application? This creates a tension between action and contemplation, inviting us to reflect on the balance between practical use and deeper meaning. Distributive justice. Distributive justice is the concept in political philosophy concerned with the fair allocation of goods, wealth, opportunities, and resources within a society. It explores how to distribute benefits and burdens in a way that ensures fairness, equality, and justice for all members of society. There are different theories of distributive justice, each offering a distinct approach to what constitutes a fair distribution. Some argue for equality. Everyone should receive the same share, while others advocate for distribution based on need, merit, or contribution to society. What makes distributive justice so emotionally compelling is that it directly touches on our sense of fairness and equality. The question of how wealth, opportunities, and rights should be shared evokes deep feelings of moral urgency, especially in societies with stark inequalities. Think about the raw emotional impact of seeing some people with far more than they could ever need, while others struggle to meet basic needs. This stark contrast makes the question of distributive justice urgent and painful because it challenges our ideas about what is fair and right. Distributive justice calls on us to think about what we owe to others and how our collective well-being is intertwined. Do those who contribute more to society deserve more, or should everyone have access to basic needs regardless of their contributions? The debate brings to the surface complex feelings about entitlement, responsibility, and compassion. It stirs emotions of frustration, anger, and empathy, forcing us to reflect on the inequities that permeate our world and ask whether we are truly living in a just society. The pursuit of distributive justice forces us to confront the deeper questions of who we are as a community and what kind of world we want to build. Ontology of art. The ontology of art is the philosophical study of the nature of art itself, what it is, what makes something art, and what properties or qualities define art as a distinct category of human experience. It delves into questions like, what is the essence of a painting, a sculpture, or a performance? Is art defined by its form, its intention, or its reception? And how do we distinguish between what is considered art and what is not? At its core, the ontology of art seeks to understand the very existence of art, its place in the world, and its relationship to the broader categories of life, culture, and meaning. What makes the ontology of art emotionally stirring is the way it challenges our perceptions of creativity and beauty. It forces us to confront the subjective nature of art, why one person may see a painting as a masterpiece, while another dismisses it as meaningless. This concept evokes a deep sense of wonder, as it invites us to reconsider what we value in art, and why certain objects or experiences can stir emotions, inspire change, or transcend time. Art isn't just something we look at. It's something that, when done right, resonates with our deepest selves. The questions raised by the ontology of art make us examine the very ways in which art shapes our lives, identities, and cultures, sparking an internal dialogue about what is truly valuable. Yet, this philosophical exploration can also stir discomfort, as it reveals the inherent ambiguity in defining what art is. Can a piece of trash on the street be art? What about a digital work that exists only in a virtual space? The ontology of art forces us to confront our own biases, ideas, and emotions around creativity and value, making us question how much of our perception of art is shaped by tradition, societal influence, or personal preference. This journey into the essence of art is both a deeply personal and universal exploration, one that speaks to our need for meaning, beauty, and connection in a world often defined by uncertainty. Natural rights theory. Natural rights theory is the philosophical concept that every individual possesses certain inherent rights simply by virtue of being human. These rights are not granted by governments or societies, but are considered pre-existing, rooted in nature or human dignity. These fundamental rights include life, liberty, and property, principles that were famously articulated by philosophers like John Locke. According to natural rights theory, these rights are universal and inalienable, meaning they cannot be surrendered or transferred, even with consent. What makes natural rights theory emotionally resonant is its appeal to a sense of justice that transcends human-made laws. It suggests that there are certain moral truths about human beings that exist independent of political systems, truths that are inherent in our very existence. This perspective holds that every individual is entitled to respect and autonomy, and that society must be structured to protect these basic rights. The idea that these rights are self-evident taps into a deep emotional instinct for fairness and equality, compelling us to recognize the intrinsic worth of every human being, regardless of social or economic status. However, natural rights theory also raises complex questions. If rights are universal and inalienable, how do we reconcile conflicting rights? For example, if one person's right to property conflicts with another's right to life or liberty, who decides which right takes precedence? And if these rights are based on nature or reason, how do we define what they are in practice? And who determines that definition? These questions stir debate and, at times, frustration, as the theory's idealistic vision of justice clashes with the messy realities of human society. Natural rights theory forces us to confront the moral foundations of our political systems, challenging us to consider how well our laws and institutions truly protect the rights of all individuals. It speaks to our deepest instincts for fairness and dignity, even as it compels us to wrestle with the challenges of translating these abstract principles into a just and functioning society. Philosophy of mind. The philosophy of mind is a field that delves into some of the deepest and most perplexing questions about consciousness, thought, and the relationship between the mind and the body. It asks fundamental questions like, what is consciousness? How does the mind relate to the brain? Can thoughts and emotions be reduced to neural activity, or is there something more to the mental experience that eludes the physical world? The philosophy of mind explores the very essence of who we are, how our subjective experiences, or qualia, arise from physical processes, and whether consciousness can be fully explained by science or whether it remains an enigma. What makes the philosophy of mind so emotionally charged is that it addresses the core of human existence. Our minds are not just our thoughts, they are our very sense of self. Our memories, emotions, desires, and perceptions shape our understanding of the world and our place within it. To question the nature of the mind is to question the very nature of who we are. Imagine the existential weight of pondering whether your thoughts and experiences are nothing more than the byproducts of electrochemical processes in the brain. Or, conversely, the profound sense of awe when considering that the mind may be something greater, something that transcends the physical body. The mind-body problem, the question of how mental states, such as beliefs and desires, relate to physical states of the brain, is a central issue in this philosophy. It creates a tension between materialism, which seeks to explain everything in terms of physical matter, and dualism, which suggests that the mind and body are separate. This conflict is both intellectually exhilarating and emotionally unsettling, as it forces us to confront the mystery of our own consciousness and the very nature of reality. The philosophy of mind stirs a sense of wonder and unease, urging us to look deeper into the most intimate part of ourselves, our awareness, our thoughts, our consciousness. In doing so, it challenges us to consider whether we are simply our brains or whether the mind is something more, something that may forever elude complete understanding.